Tim Heffernan is an experienced consumer peer worker who is passionate about the development and support of the peer workforce. He identifies as a person with a lived experience of mental health challenges and recovery and has held several significant roles in the mental health and wellbeing sector. These include serving as the former Deputy Commissioner with the New South Wales Mental Health Commission, co-chair of the National Mental Health Commission's National Stigma and Discrimination Reduction Strategy Steering Committee, and Deputy co-chair of the National Peer Workforce Development Guidelines and Steering Committee. Tim's going to present a keynote address today called Here I Am, Lived Experience, Human Rights and Community. Please welcome to the stage Tim Heffernan.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that introduction. And thank you all for having me here. I'm not quite as colourful as Giancarlo, but I'll try to make up for it with some creativity. Carolyn's prompted me to be confident I can include some poetry in my presentation today. So hopefully that will be a highlight. We'll see. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gadigal people, and also the Dharawal people from where I've come from in Wollongong today, and acknowledge elders past and present. I'd like to reinforce that this land has never been ceded, and there's that business is still to be done. I'd like also to recognise the lived experience of the people in the room, all of you. The personal lived experience of people who have experience of mental health challenges, mental health problems, however you frame it. I think it's important that you choose the language that's most comfortable for you. And I'd also like to recognise the lived experience of the people who care for us when we need it and who love us all the time. Our families, our carers, our kinship groups. Without you, a lot of us wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that investment of families and carers into the people that they love is just so important. So I've titled this "Here I Am, Lived Experience, Human Rights and Community." Not to say, here I am, this is my time, but to highlight the individual, the person, the importance of each and every person in this room, the importance of each and every person's experience of life, of the different pathways that life takes us down in a very complex and difficult world that we live in. I think it's important that we all think about, here I am. This is my opportunity. I can contribute as an individual, but as part of a larger community. I like to, I used to teach high school English for a while, I'm attracted to this quote from Henry Thoreau from his book of essays called Walden, which was written in 1854. And I think we just have to focus on this framing of the individual. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. We go different ways, we have different experiences, we express ourselves differently, we relate to the world differently. All of those experiences are valid. All of those experiences are grounded in meaning, and all of those experiences make us who we are. I want to start, by reinforcing my belief that psychosis, which I've experienced, mental health issues, mental illness, those words that language that we use, is something that does not exist purely in me or in a person, but it's something that comes from our relationship with society, with the world, with the communities that we live in. So, in saying that, I think that's so important as we move forward in essence to recognise the importance of psychosocial supports, and moving a little bit away from the dominance of the biomedical model. You know, when I had my first episode of psychosis, it was explained as that chemical imbalance in my brain. It was framed as a problem within myself. And I've moved away from that framing of my relationship with the world and the way it becomes a little bit different at times. So, you know, it's important now because we're facing, I think, in New South Wales, I think we've got the second highest involuntary hospitalisation in Australia. We have similar high rates of the use of community treatment orders. We have a broader social context where many people who are affected by mental health issues are faced with economic inequalities, displacement, homelessness. We talked about homes before, and are marginalised in a society that should be, where we should be part of it. You know, we are part of community. We have obligations to community. Community has obligations to us. I think too often mental health gets put aside, separate, and out of that context of how we exist in a bigger world. So we have this idea of what would it be like to not concentrate on healing the individual, that person who walks to a different drummer, but how would we go if we heal community and put our emphasis on community and the things we can make better, the relationships that we can nurture. So I'm speaking from, I suppose, lived experience expertise. It is my knowledge gained from lived experience, from study. It's not theory. And I believe lived experience can make our systems more relevant, equitable, effective, and accountable. We need to frame the engagement of people with lived experience, both personal lived experience and lived experience of caring, as a requirement, an absolute non-negotiable for all high-quality policy and service design and delivery. That's important. I'll tell you a little bit about my story, and then look at human rights and come back to community. So, you know, I came into my first admission in a world that was a bit similar to today. It was Ronald Reagan, Star Wars. It was the downing of a Korean jet airliner KAL-007 over Russia, the invasion of Grenada, the bombing of the US embassy in Beirut, and I emerged into a belief that I had to live past my birthday, which was my 23rd birthday, or the world would end. And I heard the jets and the bombs when I was listening to my transistor radio in the bedroom of Mum and Dad's house where I'd retreated to. And I went, voluntarily into hospital. And subsequently, over probably a period of a couple of months, I got out of hospital still in what would be termed active psychosis, with beliefs that were different. And my family nurtured me, my brothers and sister, my mum and dad, helped me through, took me away on holidays and things, and made me feel part of family again, part of that community that I'm talking about, so important. But then I hit a different mental health system when I had another psychotic episode in 1985. The first one was in 1983. And it took me a long time to come to terms with this a couple of hospitalizations, which resulted in, a escorted ambulance ride, escorted by police from Wagga to Goulburn, stopping at Gundagai Hospital, being taken out of the ambulance and taken down in the foyer of Gundagai Hospital and injected, so I'd be sedated for the rest of the journey, arriving at Kenmore, put in the... Yeah, so it was a different story, which probably almost destroyed me, but I managed to get back through. But this is the first poem. It's a part of a longer poem which took many years to write, but creativity, as Carolyn mentioned before, is so important in our journey, and it helped me construct and understand what had happened to me. So these are just two stanzas, and it's just to show I think the violence of what the system can do to people. Spit syllables at your father and blaspheme the missing Lord in the antiseptic stench of some sterile casualty ward. Wake up in an ambulance, moving somewhere they won't explain. Escort lights pulse blues ahead and charge the wiper scourging rain. Pause in a halfway hospital and repel the dribbling syringe. Feel the weight of mocking wardsmen, needle stabs to make you cringe. Strip past your nakedness once they've pushed and shoved you in. Squat in the blurred baptismal bath while some angel records your sin. Scream at the threatening needle as they hold you down again. Gag on your spastic tongue and shudder in epileptic pain. Scream too loud once too often and be bound for the blackness cell. Thump cement and howl at walls. Sit and shiver in soundproof hell. Pester the nurse for more than your hourly cigarette. He's had it up to you, up to here with you, so this time feel his threat. Parade from doorless showers, in the pyjamas for the day, the mismatched communal costume for this acute, imprisoned play. So that was Kenmore wards, 1985. There are still some aspects of that treatment which we can see in hospitals today. So I got out of hospital, went back to family, went back to teaching. I had been in the Catholic system, had to resign because I was behaving a bit odd, but I got a job again in the public system and didn't tell them I was unwell, and taught for 20 years as a high school teacher. And made it to 2005, and a combination of various things, not so much the teaching, but very difficult faculty I was working in at the time, led me to leave that job, and almost straight away spiral into another episode. And this one, I won't read the whole poem, but it begins at Central. I left school the next day, I saw the doctor, he gave me some time off, came to Central Station, hopped off the train and went for a walk around Sydney. So around up George Street, down around Barangaroo, finding my way to the Opera House after listening to some Aboriginal musicians playing the didgeridoo just at Circular Quay there. And I went into the Opera House and the Utzman room was opened, and so I walked in. I don't think I was meant to. There's nobody in there, but there was a suit jacket just over the chair, so I tried it on, and it fitted. It was perfect fit. So I walked out of the Opera House with a suit jacket, and I went through the pockets in Farm Cove. There were a couple of fountain pens, and fountain pens are a very important symbol for me. And not much, no cash or things like that. I probably, I've tried to organise an event where I could give the jacket back to the Opera House, but I haven't managed that yet. But inside the jacket was this goes to Denise's message, I think, was a quote from the erotic writer Anais Nin, and it stayed with me throughout my journey. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage, was the quote. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. So it is important, whoever we are, to to be courageous, because our lives will open up. So I moved quickly into disability work for about 4 or 5 years. Then my first job was an 8-hour-a-week job as a consumer rehabilitation assistant, which was a peer worker in the Illawarra Shoalhaven rehab service. And that job I did for probably 12 years, getting full-time hours, and moved into work with the PHN, with a commission, board member of a RAFMI, so I do have ties to our carer organisations, and have done a few other things. I'm here today representing Being, primarily, given John Carlo was initially going to speak. And I just want to enforce, the peak bodies, Mental Health Carers New South Wales, Being, Mental Health Consumers, were extremely important in this landscape of mental health and lived experience. And we're growing in strength and growing in numbers and stature, and sometimes we have the ear of the minister, and that's fantastic. So if you're not a member, join. Just go onto the website and join. The peak bodies exist in every state and territory now, and we have a national alliance, Mental Health Consumer Alliance, and Mental Health Carers Australia, representing us at that national level. So we've built structures that can support lived experience and our growth. So with that, we're just hiring a general manager for the first National Mental Health Peer Workforce Association, Professional Association. Again, another structure that's really important. Peer work at scale is the solution to all of the problems. Well, I could be a bit delusional, but most of the problems. I have an analogy here. Peer work is like climate change. Climate change, we're trying to fix it by changing the inputs into the system. So we're removing until the Iran war, but we're removing the coal and the oil and replacing it with fossil fuel, with the renewable resources like wind and solar. The mental health system we often hear is in collapse. It's not working. We hear it all the time. So similarly, we need to change the inputs into that system. So lived experience work, peer work, is the renewable resource of this new mental health system. It's bad luck that we have to get rid of some of the fossil fuel that still exists in our system. We have to change things that are not working anymore. And there's a lot of resistance to that. It's a thing called power. I often refer back to Danius Puris, the Special Rapporteur's report that he published in 2017, where he looked at the burden of obstacles in front of us to change mental health, not the burden of disease, the burden of obstacles in front of us. And he named, as a psychiatrist, Lithuanian psychiatrist, the dominance of the biomedical model is one of those obstacles. The power asymmetrics, where power lies with some people and not others. And in our research, the bias of the medical model. So again, lived experience involvement in research is important. I'm running out of time, which is pretty typical. I think, Denise, you were a bit over though, weren't you? So I promised a poem. So this is another poem. This one's about about the need for psychosocial supports. It's called gaps. The space between us, between friends, between having friends and not having friends, the space between going to school or not going to school, between having a job and not having a job, to having a house or not having a house, a family or the breeding out, soothe my dribbling pillow, the space between getting up or staying in bed, the lack of balance in our bank accounts, the gap from getting up and going out the door, the movement from incomprehension to comprehension, from adolescence to adulthood, from citizenship to incarceration, that space from the hospital to our homes, the things we were thinking and the things we could not say, from being a service user, a consumer, to being a human being, from one service to another sentence. There is a space about not having a voice to having a voice, and the gap between budgets allocated and the budgets received. The distance between two people, the way you retain that distance, the glass that separates you from me. Are we the structural elements of this thing, or are we the gap filler holding together incompatible building material? Are we the architects or the public housing tenants existing in buildings unfit for purpose? Do we deserve an opera house? Psychosocial supports. Psychosocial supports, foundational supports, are promised, and obviously the budget allocates 6 million and 3 million from the feds, and then states are going to contribute to the development of these foundational supports, which are psychosocial supports. They sound, the word doesn't sound very important, but the foundation, if we take it literally, the foundation forms the base from which everything else develops. It is not there by itself. It is there to start people on their journey, to lift people back into the community, back into their families, back into work, back into housing, back into all of those spaces that we deserve to be, that we have to be if we want a society that truly reflects humanity and not a narrow version of it. Anyway, so another sort of analogy, I think, just to finish off, communities are like rainforests, and rainforests have beautiful canopies, you know, and things grow there, and it's green, it's lush, it's fertile. You cut down some of the rainforest, the forest, you expose the bare earth, there's erosion, those sorts of things happen. With rainforests and trees, you know, trees have a fungal growth called mycelium wrapped around their roots that allows them to communicate initially to their own sorts of trees, but out to other trees. And so similarly, our communities need to build, replant where necessary to get that canopy going again. And so I'll just finish with a little poem. And in this, again, it's this metaphor of growth, and rain being a symbol of the things, the nature, the important stuff that we need. It's called hydration. Sometimes the rain specifies me, asks to see, seeks out my desert place, and turns me into rainforest. Okay, thank you.
I'm delighted to say that we have the Minister in the room with us now. Minister Rose Jackson is Minister for Water, Minister for Housing, Minister for Homelessness, Minister for Mental Health and Minister for Youth. That is quite a portfolio that she is responsible for here in New South Wales. Rose is a fierce advocate for climate action, criminal justice reform, and addressing housing affordability and homelessness. With over 15 years as a Labor member, she believes in amplifying the voices of young women, working parents, and those with energy and ideas for the future in Parliament. Her values centre around social justice, equality, and democracy. Rose's activism began in high school, protesting against racism and later leading campaigns for women's rights at the University of Sydney. The Minister's going to address us today, and then we have an opportunity. Tim will come back and join her on the stage, and we will have an opportunity then for questions. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Minister Rose Jackson, Minister for Mental Health.
Good morning, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. My name's Rose. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying respects to elders past and present, and extending that respect and acknowledgement to any Aboriginal people joining us for this really wonderful event. I'd love to thank the team at One Door and Mind who put on this symposium. Some of you may have seen me here before. Come along every year when I can. I've almost 4 years into the job as Minister for Mental Health. Ministers for Mental Health don't often have that length of service, but it's been a pleasure for me to be able to partner with the sector for that period of time and focus on some of our shared priorities for reform. And it's great to be here with the wonderful team from Mind Australia and One Door again. Thanks so much, Tim, for those remarks. I was really hoping you were going to do a poem. I always love to hear your poems. I'd really love to get a copy of Gaps. I thought that was a beautiful piece of work. It's hard enough sometimes for politicians to get up and talk and, all of the sort of nonsense talking points that we're given and the boring things that we normally have to say. But following a poet is particularly challenging. So I'll try and keep my comments relatively short, to the point, focused on the things that I'm working on at the moment, and then we can get into a bit of a dialogue and questions and answers, which I think is always a really useful way to focus on issues that you have in your mind. The key things that I wanted to say are the theme of this year's symposium, I think, hits on two areas that really resonate with the work that we're doing at the New South Wales Government. The first is lived experience. That's something that is forming a core part of the way that we're trying to reform and build out our mental health services. We now have the peer worker framework. We now have peer workers embedded in our districts. The growth in the peer workforce in New South Wales has been significant, reflecting the focus that we want to have on peer workers as leaders in mental health care delivery. There's obviously still quite a long way to go to really embed that profession, to professionalise it and to recognise it, but that is a transition that we are all in New South Wales. It's fantastic to have the national recognition now, and we're hoping that these new frameworks nationally will really elevate the work that we're trying to do to all of the jurisdictions, but that is something that's critically important for us. And we are not going back to a model where peer workers are not front and centre of care delivery in New South Wales. The other part of the theme that really resonates with the work that we're trying to do is innovation. There's a couple of areas where we're trying to do things differently, where we're trying to recognise that business as usual and the way things have been done in the past has not delivered the outcomes that we want to see for the community and for consumers. The first is we are continuing work, and we'll have more to say in detail soon as part of the upcoming New South Wales budget, around different first responder responses to mental health crises. So this is something that's been called out again and again. The way that when people are experiencing a mental health crisis, the response from police as that first responder isn't in the interests of the consumer, their family, or in fact of police. That piece of work, backed in, once again, unsurprisingly, by the Bondi Junction coronial inquest, is something that is really important to the New South Wales Government. We've been working on that. Some of you have probably been in the conversations that the New South Wales Government has been trying to have about what another model could look like. We will have more to say in the upcoming budget, and I can't give away any of that because the Treasurer will kick my ass. But that is an area where we are really focused on delivering an innovative and new response. The second one is we're really keen to continue to trial and then expand our hospital in the home model that we started at the Mid-Coast LHD. So one of the things that has been just really consistent feedback from consumers and their families and clinicians is, as much as we can, focus on community-based care, getting people out of the hospital environments, whether it's the emergency departments, worst place in the world to be having a mental health crisis, acute wards, which also some of the new ones that we're building are much more forward-thinking and well-designed and have well-being principle in their design, but many of the old ones that we have continue to be not fit for purpose. So as much as we can deliver care in a non-hospital-based environment, we're keen to do that. And the Mid-Coast LHD has been working really closely with teams around Kempsey to actually make hospital in the home a reality in that community. Now, look, it's one town in one LHD in one part of New South Wales. Clearly, that's not meeting the needs of the community more broadly. But this is a specific thing that we have done in the last 12 months to try and say, well, it's not just about talking in nice terms about moving care out of the hospital and into the community. It's actually about doing it, about resourcing it, about having models to deliver it. And that's what we've done. So that is currently underway. Obviously, we're going to be looking at the results. Obviously, we're going to be talking to consumers and others about their experiences. We've asked Being to be part of that, to be part of the evaluation of that. I am obviously hopeful it's going to be a success and that we're able to scale that hospital in the home model to other LHDs and other parts of New South Wales. Alongside that is obviously things like our virtual psychiatry hub, where again, we've tried to find new ways to deliver care that just make it more accessible for people so that people are able to access the care that they need in our system. But having said that, we recognise that there are still plenty of gaps, as Tim so beautifully articulated. There are many gaps between community-based care and hospital-based care, between state and federal governments, between LHDs and non-government organisations who are doing wonderful work in the community. And we're just very enthusiastic, as always, to lean into filling those gaps. A big one at the moment is the state and federal government. That is a huge area of focus and reform over the next 12 months looking forward. We have the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement extended for 12 months, but pretty well eviscerated by the Productivity Commission and anyone else who's looked at it as not fit for purpose agreement that needs reform. We were supportive of extending the agreement for 12 months, not because we thought it was doing a good job. We agree with many people that it had a lot of shortcomings, but because we wanted proper time to actually look at doing something different and new and better. So that is an opportunity between us and the Commonwealth to actually grab the period of time that we now have over the next 12 months and say, well, how do we not just roll our arm over, keep doing the things that the way that they've always been done? What does that reform piece look like? How do we embed peer work and lived experience into that process? How do we ensure that our services are accessible and affordable? How do we use it as an opportunity to talk about some of the things that Tim said about taking emphasis off biomedical models and focusing on social supports, psychosocial supports? The opportunity to do that alongside NDIS reform is a good one. However, we have to make sure that as part of that, we're not increasing those gaps. We're not widening the gaps between the care that people are able to access, patchy and limited and lopsided as it is, and what's delivered into the future. So that piece between the state and federal governments, if I have to say what I think is probably the key area of focus over the next 12 months, that's it. Because that is so critical to getting this right. That gap, again, between the primary healthcare that the Commonwealth are intended to deliver and us at the acute end with the hospitals, is widening. There's not the kind of good alignment that I would want to see. But as I said, we've got the opportunity now to try and do things better. Really, my message to finish is, as we're on that journey, and I do think it's worth reflecting on the way that the journey between, models that were incredibly stigmatizing and dehumanizing and denied the dignity of people living with mental illness and what we have now, you can see real progress. There's an opportunity for us to continue that journey, but only if we continue to work together. That's something that is very important to me. We're very clear that walking on that journey, being led by people with lived experience and their families and carers is the work that we want to do. There is an opportunity as those agreements are being renegotiated and budgets are being decided to close some of those gaps. And that's something that I'm very passionate about continuing to do with everyone in this room. So thank you.
Now, I will resist the urge to try and get more out of you about the budget.
No, I feel like these forums are often sort of timed, like slightly awkwardly just before this is strategically before the state budget. But I just can't. But I will say, that piece of work that I have called out a couple of times for people who've been hearing the things that I've been saying in the speeches that I give, where I really just identify that piece of work around how we respond to people in mental health crisis from government service delivery. Like it's not just words. We've really focused on that, and we will have more to say in the budget.
And your passion is evident for this portfolio, and it comes across probably even more powerfully each time you come and speak at this. So having reflected on having the mental health portfolio for now almost 4 years, as you said, what's made the biggest impact on you and what still feels like unfinished business?
The thing that has had the biggest impact is speaking to consumers about, and I think I quite liked the part of your poem, Tim, where you said, patients, consumers, something, human beings. I thought that was beautiful. So speaking to human beings who live with mental ill health and their families and carers, and just hearing from them about what's working and doesn't work, I find that easily the most impactful and powerful part of the job, and like the bit that keeps me up at night as well, because obviously a lot of those conversations are about how things aren't working well and where those gaps are. So that, I think is incredibly important. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of areas where we need to focus. I do think the biggest one for me, probably just because of the state jurisdiction in the areas where we have the most levers to pull, is just how poorly served people are by the hospital environment. And that's right from the emergency departments through to our acute wards. There's amazing people, staff doing incredible jobs in there, but that whole model, I think, is just not really working. Some of that's because the facilities aren't up to scratch. Some of that's because emergency departments are a complete mess. Some of that's just because people are unable to be discharged and cared for in community-based settings because they don't exist and they've been under-resourced. But to me, that is just such a core fail point that we continue to have. And that is the responsibility of the state, to deliver hospital-based acute care or meaningful alternatives to it. So that, for me, is just such an ongoing piece of work that I would really love to try and do better for the mental health sector.
So just getting into that in a little bit more detail, a bit later on today, we've got a panel about step-up, step-down services, which are quite widely used in a number of other states, Victoria, Queensland, WA. Not so much here in New South Wales. It's sort of you're in or you're out, as opposed to that different model. Is there any interest in, from a government perspective, in thinking about those? Because they often are a way of preventing the need for an admission for a length of time.
Yeah, there is a real interest in that. So that's exactly the kind of reform that I'm referring to. So step up, step down services, long-term accommodation services, for people who, are currently experiencing long-term hospitalisation. That's another one. We are finally trying to get our Pathways to Community Living project off the ground in a meaningful way. And we have now identified sites and started to get the work underway to build them. So that's another piece of work. Fixing emergency departments or trying to manage better emergency department care, where people do need to experience that, is another piece of work. So yes, there are a number of different ways that we can try and either keep people out of hospital or improve their experience in it. But those models, those step up, step down models, I am familiar with them. I know that they have had good feedback and good impact in Victoria. And we are interested in thinking about how we might have those kind of models in New South Wales. But I'd be interested, Tim, is that something, those step up, step down models in Victoria, is that something that Being is and you guys are keen on? Would that be a priority for you guys as well?
Look, we do. Okay, sorry. We do have some models around Bathurst and Dubbo of private-public partnerships around step up, step down. Where I am in Wollongong, we were meant to go down that way. We changed the name to sub-acute, but we still had some peer workers in there, so it was a different model. And people did have a 4-week program, and a lot of people stepped up into it. The critical thing for me is that we design services that people want to go to. Over 50% of people in public mental health wards are there under the Act. I think it's 52%. And because of various experiences across the board, and I tried to articulate my own, people run from mental health services, and that can cause problems and that tension that results in tragedy sometimes. So we have to design things that people. So environments are important. I'm an official visitor in my spare time, and was at a private hospital yesterday. Effusive remarks from the consumers there, talking about this quality of care, the environment, and everything. And I feel equal here. I feel looked down upon when I go to a public mental health system. So, but in saying that, I visit public mental health services, and almost to a woman and a man, the staff are so motivated, so caring, and want to do a good job, but they're working in environments and an overarching culture, which is that one of coercion and working under the Act, where people don't have a choice, which makes that tarnishes the care, So,
and part of that environment, when you say environment, you do also mean physical environment, don't you?
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I went to the St Vincent's acute unit, and I was talking to the staff there, and similarly, amazing people who are extremely dedicated and caring. And, I sort of said to them, that sort of question, if there was one thing, you would change. It's so hard, Gill, because, for people who are really passionate about this, there's a long list. And I was really touched because one of the senior clinicians there said, the one thing that I would just love to change is the toilets here are shit. They're those metal, horrible, really clinical, really, awful, uninviting. And he just said, that's just terrible, and we've got people in here and we're trying to live a care, and look at these bathrooms. This is dehumanizing. This is, looks like the worst kind of, old school metal toilet. And to me, that was just an example of, one, the importance of the physical environment, but two, they didn't mention anything about their own wages or conditions or anything, which are all completely legitimate things they could have raised, and I'm sure they care about them too. But that number one thing was, I don't like that the people being cared for here have got this crap facility, and if I could change anything, it'd be that. I thought that's beautiful.
Sorry, we're building towers of mental health. They look nice, lovely linoleum. I love linoleum, but courtyards that are artificial grass and stuff like that. At least at Kenmore, when I was a patient there, we had open dormitories, everybody in the same room, snoring away. You had those communal showers and things, but you had the garden, and you could go out and walk in the garden, and spend time in nature, which is really important.
Have we got questions from the floor? Over here? That was a very direct hand going up.
I'm a parent of a 51-year-old that's been scheduled about probably about half a dozen times in the last 25 odd years. Now, what puzzles me is that the system only takes care of a patient once they've been discharged from hospital for a certain amount of time, and then they're on their own. Now, what the government doesn't understand is mental health problems do not go away. You're reliant on the doctors for their monthly inoculation to report to the health department that he's not too well. That doesn't happen. The doctors are too busy. They just get a nurse. Our son just goes into the practice. The nurse attends to him, gets the doctor to sign the permission to re-inject him, and nobody cares. He's on his own.
Yeah, I mean, we do recognise that mental health conditions don't go away. It's not that we don't know that is the case. It's just that's why I talk about my acknowledgement that the biggest gap is the community-based care. Is that when people are being cared for in the community, that is the area where there is the most under-resourcing and the most limited support. And all I can say to you, sir, is I absolutely recognise that what you have described is what happens, and that area is the one where we are trying to just deliver the most resources. It's a big gap. So
a month, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And pipe in here. I think the lived experience peer workforce can do a lot of that. Maintain connection with people in the community. I think when we think of community, we think in mental health, we think of community mental health services, which we need to broaden our concept of community. So mental health is the responsibility of the whole of community, the whole of government, all social services. And so we should have people with lived experience working there and helping to design the programs that might provide opportunities for your son. I think while mental health, I've got I've gone off diagnoses. My first one was schizophrenia. My second one was bipolar 1, mood disorder, or manic depression at that time, and now bipolar 1 mood disorder. I've had 8 admissions. Probably half of those have been involuntary over my lifetime, and I firmly believe if people can, not define themselves by the illness which they've got, but recognize that there are other aspects of their being, strengths that they have that allow them to explore, that life can be better. It doesn't have to be always within the bounds of enforced depot injections, enforced hospitalizations. People have a right to live in community safely. We all have that, and that's where people need to be connected.
Okay. You're sort of a bit obscured by a poll there, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that, Rose. Look, we did have a stepped up and stepped down program, but in 2018 that program was closed. I'm talking about CHIPS, which stands for Enactment of Community Housing Implementation Program. Those clients, I think there was about 25 of them. I'm part of Parramatta community. In the last 15 or so years, we've had 10 deaths of that community itself, with 2 coroner's cases within that. Now, CHIPS community is still about within the broader context of that community because I'm attached to it indirectly. Now, those clients had a combination of a rehab, which was within Cumberland Hospital, which is a tertiary teaching state hospital with a state heritage listed garden, as well as it is also heritage listed. But the thing is, the clients integrated to the day-to-day living programs, both run by One Door and Uniting Care. They integrated with the social enterprise run under Richmond Fellowship. That community still exists within the Bible study group within the church that's part of Cumberland. That's what we're talking about state to state. But the other thing is the non-hospital model. Where is the outpatient programs that are public health funded as an alternate to hospitalisation? We've got to look at what services that were working, that have been closed down, to reinvigorating or allocating services that we're recreating.
I mean, I'm very happy to look into that model. This is exactly the kind of conversations that are valuable to me, because we are really interested in what those services could look like. And if there were examples of them in New South Wales in the past, very happy to try and draw the lessons of what was successful about them, if there were any shortcomings, what they were. But I accept the point that you're making and that this gentleman was making over here. All of this is cheaper than hospitalisation. Not that that's why we should do it. Actually, we should do it because it's also better for human beings to be cared for outside of the often terrible environments in hospitals with the noise and the sound and the smell. But the reality is it is more affordable. It is better for a range of reasons if we can get those models working well.
This lady down here.
Hello, I'm Janet Ma. I have a couple of statement questions.
Try and get to a question if you can.
Look, the theme seems to be, from what you've spoken about, Rose, is access to care that is needed. Now, I think we know of multiple alternatives to hospitalisation, and my memory goes back to the Richmond implementation days before anyone here was born, when we actually had workable programs that all closed because of little mini disasters that no one was prepared to deal with, all of which I think, or majority of which, would have been avoidable. So I think we go back to that, and there are lived experience examples of services that do this. Brook Red in Queensland has been doing this for yonks, decades. In Victoria and other places, there are lived experience emergency members of teams that go and intervene. There are also live-in services for people who wish to not go to hospital. So I think it's not an impossible task, but people like myself and Tim and others in this room, if we go into a slide, I, for one, have no one to go to. I go to my GP and demand certain medications, and then I hide until it's over. I would rather die than go into one of your state-based services, having had my experiences. So I have to do it myself because there is no alternative. I don't have a psychiatrist on tap. There are a lot of us out here, like that gentleman's son, who manage our own mental health as far as we can, because there is no way to get help when you know you're sliding. You have to get so sick that you need really critical care. I think that's wrong when most of us have learned how to manage our illnesses relatively well. We know when we're sliding and we can't get help. So that's critical. That has to be addressed. Now, the only other thing I wanted to say is regarding your peer work initiatives. I love it. I was one of the very early implementers. But I think what we're lacking is a standard of peer work that we can be proud of. We need to stop the colonisation of the peer workforce. We need, amongst ourselves, to develop key competencies for various levels of capability and competence in service. Otherwise, it'll kill itself. Thank you.
I would just say thank you so much, Janet. And on that last point, that's something that the peer workforce and others are keen to develop, those kind of competencies, those scales, we could work together to provide funding, and resources so that you were able to lead that and pad out that work to achieve that goal. I think that sounds fantastic, and we could work together to try and make that happen.
Yeah, and we now have the New South Wales Peer Workforce Framework, which took about 25 years to get out. In southeastern New South Wales, we developed our framework down there, which is good. And we have the National Development Guidelines, and the National Peer Workforce Association now hopefully will make a difference. I think the solution is quality peer work at scale, and we don't have anything near the scale yet. But for people, I was in a meeting. We have a peer work meeting with Faye helps out, Faye Jackson, each month. And one of the peer workers who works at Campbelltown, look, I didn't work for 15 years. I was severely disabled, and I'm working as a peer worker now, articulate, on target, doing the job. And so for some of us, and for me, when I got back into work, peer work was one of the only ways you could get back into work, because if people knew you had a mental illness, you couldn't get a job. You know, the stigma discrimination is real. But yeah, and thanks, Janet, for everything.
So up the back, and then I'll come to the lady down here in the board. We're going to run out of time. But
Hi, my name's Simone. I'm a consumer with a lived experience. And I've lived through the experience of many organisations. I pay my respects to the original foundation of this once upon a time being the Schizophrenia Fellowship. That in the processes of all the rebranding and the merging and the management changeovers, a lot of the really passionate members have been lost in that community in a growth spurt for Mind and One Door to become that. Take no offence to this, but it is a common practice. For example, the One Door Pioneer Clubhouse that I attend, where Kinga works, and is now really positively run on with peer-led peer educators. Every time now I'm not talking about gaps here, I'm talking about cracks in losing the community every time management changes hands. Peers, cracks in the losing the community when it goes digital and we're not digital friendly. Some of us are now over 55s and would be happy if the IT world blew up and we just had pen and paper, right?
I'm with you.
Cracks in the community being lost when funding runs out and you've got another model that we're just going to replace this one with, and then you qualify, you're eligible. Is everybody eligible along the way? And then you've lost community every time you make a shift, and again cracks, losing the community with a high staff rollover. All those turnovers from staff to the change of management, and I've witnessed and spoken to another member who's no longer with us, 25 years, 30 years now at Pioneer Clubhouse. He's seen management changed hands 8 times, and every single time the community walk with their feet. The mindset of the new management is it changes the whole value and meaning that we initially started with it, and the meaning and the value has been lost with the community being lost. I just wish the new CEO to hear and understand the things that we've been passionate about, they're being destroyed in the process, and could possibly be in a box under the house growing cobwebs. And I've been kicking and screaming to open these passionate projects that kept that. So I'm working the word out, and then we'll get there. When you're not passionate, sentimental,
yes,
to what was pen and paper, become digital and lose. There's cracks and there's things under the house being buried, and the community is just not just communities being destroyed. Those projects are in boxes being destroyed.
Okay, let's follow that up, because they're really really important.
I've sent many emails with no replies.
Okay, thank you. We are going to. I'm sorry, we're this lady here. I promised. In the blue. Yeah. Sorry. All right, we're going to have to be quick.
Oh no, I can't be quick because this is too important. I'm sorry, I'm joking. School teacher, always a school teacher for many years, always worked in disability, mostly with children. As I grow older and times come, you need to leave work or whatever, I also now work as a disability support worker, and I also have worked in the courts for 20 years as a volunteer in the criminal justice system, supporting people with disabilities, mental health problems, cognitive decline, you name it, it's all there. What I've learned from that experience is that all the services, I've written them down here somewhere, the police, housing, the Attorney General's Department, on it goes. And I was fortunate to be part of a program in the New South Wales Department of Education where on one occasion we did work together for the implementation of a program for first-time parents with newborn babies, and we were doing it in areas of disadvantage. And we'd visit those children every month to make sure everything was going fine. Now, that's just an example of how these groups got together. They could see the value of it, and they all you had knowledge about children and their development. What's happening? I didn't even know this. I don't even know who you are. I don't know who your organisation is. Somehow this came to my awful computer, I agree with you, and I thought, I'm going because I've got a nephew with schizophrenia. That aside, the police, the legal system, NDIS are all closely involved with the people you're supporting. And so many of the people who work there know nothing about mental health, dare I say the development of children or people's lives. Ignorance, I think, is your biggest enemy. Working in NDIS, my God, I was the only one with qualifications. People thought they were. That's why I'm worried when you say employing people who have been there. It's very easy to be there, but you still got to be able to separate from that often to help people. And so there's so much wrong happening. You know, I go to court with someone with a mental health problem. Guess what's going to happen? I can guarantee it now. The magistrate will make sure that that's the last person of the day.
Have you got a question? Can you just
The
wrap it
question
in?
is,
Yep.
can you do something about encouraging that collaboration and to ensure that people understand the issues facing your clients so the police don't run after them with their taser guns and walk towards them?
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the issues you have identified are really at the core of some of the policy responses that we're trying to develop. So firstly, that issue of police not being the right people to respond often when there is a mental health breakdown or crisis. I completely accept that point, actually, as do the police. They themselves recognise that that's not their area of expertise. So that conversation that we were having about more detail coming soon is exactly to speak to that point, is to put together a new way of responding to those crises moments. But more broadly, to the point that you made about trying to encourage collaboration, I mean, the gaps, the silos, they exist in government too. We're always trying to lean into where we can work together. The one thing I'd say, just as an example of an opportunity there, is we do have this new suicide prevention legislation in New South Wales. It's called suicide prevention legislation. I mean, it's got to be called something, but really it is about mental well-being and improved mental health literacy and engagement across the New South Wales government. That's what it's really about. And the entire point of that is to move this conversation out of the clinical, biomedical health framework and make clear to every part of the New South Wales government that these issues are their business too. So whether you are police or education or courts or housing, which is a big one, Tim, I accept that, you have a role to play in training your workforce and understanding what practical actions you can take to prevent suicide and promote mental health and wellbeing. And so it's new legislation. We've just got the councils going. Being are on it. Other organisations are on it. And that's exactly what we're going to try and do. Say to every part of government, there is a baseline requirement that you have to know about this stuff and to care about it. And I think hopefully that will provide an opportunity to improve some of the things you've talked about.
An NGO we're looking at designing a different version of a recovery college. Recovery colleges are generally places where clinicians and consumers design courses that can be delivered to consumers and members of the public and people who work in mental health. But the idea of, okay, you've got that in a community like Wollongong, why don't we partner with the community colleges? Why don't we partner with Woolworths and Coles and other large employers and have a program whereby the college, which is a mental health thing, reaches out to other places and including housing, etc., to try and get those sorts of things established. I think we need to take sort of proactive action to design things better so that they are linked up, as well as have legislation that does it.
I know there's lots of questions, but unfortunately we've actually gone over time. So apologies to all of you who still had questions. Perhaps you can get them to us and we can see if there's a way to at least hear your voice on those issues and perhaps interact with the Minister or Tim to cover those off in a different way. So can you please join me in thanking Minister Jackson and Tim Heffernan?
But we want to move to our next session, the last session that we have before lunch. And I'd like to introduce Katie Larsen, who is the Executive Director of Lived Experience with Mind Australia. Katie works from a lived experience and social justice perspective, drawing from her own lived experience of mental health and wellbeing challenges and LGBTQIA+ identity. At Mind, Katie leads the delivery of Mind's lived experience strategy and provides lived expertise leadership in the development of peer-led service models. Katie is a PhD candidate at Deakin University. My parents would have loved to have one of those with their own daughter, but anyway. She's researching intersectional leadership and decision-making in mainstream mental health services. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism, a Master of Social Work, and is a graduate of the National Mental Health Commission Australian Mental Health Leaders Fellowship. Katie's going to share with us all how Mind is establishing a unique residential service that will be a truly centre lived experience, values, principles and practices. The services is designed and will be run by highly experienced and skilled peer workforce. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Katie Larsen.
Hi everyone. Been a big morning, hey? That's very, very jam-packed and great discussion. Thanks for having me to you today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the lands we're on as well, the Gadigal lands, the lands of the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise that we are on land that has never been ceded. So I do recognise some faces in the room, and I was here a couple of years ago at the symposium talking about the development of lived experience-led service models and how we could conceptualise those services through systems of lived experience practice and governance. And I talked a bit about a service called the Lived Experience Residential Service. And at that point, we were deep in conceptual development. And quite frankly, 2 years ago, I had no idea if it would ever happen. So I'm very, very pleased to be back here a couple of years later and talking to you about this service, which I can tell you will open its doors for its first 4 beds at the end of next month. Thank you. So this lived experience residential service is an acute alternative. It is in a place called Geelong, which is about an hour out of Melbourne, a suburb called Mullin. We've got 2 houses on one property. One's got 4 bedrooms, one's got 5 bedrooms. The property itself is, I think, just under an acre, so lots of space that we can build sanctuary and spaces for connection. It is absolutely intended to build on the vision of what consumers have been asking for and saying would help for decades. And it equally is designed to respond to a system that doesn't work for so many people. To make that happen, we have had to really not only conceptualise but then operationalise the work I talked to you about a couple of years ago, systems of lived experience-led practice and governance. So this service has been designed by the people who are most likely to use it It has been developed and will be delivered by peer workers and peer leaders. It will be led through our lived experience division at Mind, and it will be governed through lived experience governance models that ensure we support the fidelity of the work that we're trying to do. First thing I want to tell you about when you go to this space, it doesn't feel like a mental health service at all. It's actually two houses. One's a nice little Art Deco house. The other one is a brick house, maybe 90s design. I didn't bring some pictures. I should have brought some pictures. But it is about it being a home-like environment. So quite intentionally, other than what we've needed to do to support safety, so every single bedroom has its own private bathroom, for example, and some safety around fire safety and some obvious kind of designs for workability. We haven't done all that much. They are very much still two homes. We are not operating under clinical kind of design principles. We do not have anti-ligature design. The furniture that will be in there is largely second-hand, I believe. I haven't seen any of it, actually, which I will be excited to see it when it happens, but it's out in a big shed out the back. So it's about it being a home-like space. It's a space for healing and connection. It's not a space for containment or suppression. It is intentionally being designed with and in consideration of folks with all kinds of different identities and cultures and backgrounds and needs around sensory spaces, accessibility. It's got First Nations principles incorporated, queer and multicultural. So we won't please everyone for sure, but we have intentionally built that intersectional design into how we've developed the service and the space. And we talked about it before. The Minister talked about the toilets before. We've got normal toilets. Pretty excited about that. I walk through so many mental health services and I despair at the bathrooms. We've got nice bathrooms, private bathrooms, doors don't fall off, and good toilets. Little victories. Why is it needed? I feel like Tim kind of covered this off in his incredible keynote of why it's needed. We had a Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system, as you would be probably aware, and that one of the key findings of that Royal Commission was the system was catastrophically failing. Quite often when we've done this work over the last few years, I've had people say to me, I'm a little bit worried about what you're doing. And I sort of think, well, that's fair enough. It's new. It's different. We're taking some educated risks in how we think about things. I'm a little bit worried about what happens if we don't do anything. I'm a little bit worried about what happens if this is the only version of this service that ever runs and we don't see them rolled out across the country. That's what I'm worried about. It will, it challenges the ideas about the dominance of the medical model through a fully lived experience led staff process. It is, there is no seclusion or restraint. It's a non-coercive model, which we'll talk about a bit more later. It provides choice and agency for people experiencing distress and genuine alternative. It's an acute service. It exists in community. It is not sub-acute, but it is a choice. And we hope that people who don't want to or have tried to and can't or have never found a hospital as an accessible space will see this as a space they can come to. And it's a statewide model. So 9 beds statewide, we think will be in demand, but we hope that we can demonstrate the approach of the model. So this service has been, it's been years in the making for us at Mind, but it's been decades in the making. And I want to acknowledge a bunch of people in this room included the types of people who have been advocating for this kind of service for those decades. We have seen the work of Brooke Red up in Queensland and what they've done there. We've seen other types of models occasionally around Australia, but they haven't ever been done to scale. We went and looked at the models in New Zealand. We've spoken to the models in North America. So we've learnt a lot about what doesn't work and what does work. We've moved through deep conceptual work where we've designed with community to then conceptualising and operationalising. Mind did stage 2 of this project, which was the development and the conceptual work in partnership with Alfred Mental Addiction and Health. That was an incredible process because we kind of came in with an ethos of we don't need a clinical partner, we can just do this. And we probably could have, but there was a real benefit that came from working with a clinical partner that was prepared to genuinely partner and also take the back seat in that partnership. So we worked with some of their senior psychiatrists to understand the challenge of the acute models that they delivered and to consider types of things about what we needed to build in when we thought about funding and development of the model and to not sell ourselves short. which was something that was really critical in the development of that. The other thing was partnership with government. The service just would not have happened if we hadn't had a Department of Health that had, at that time, no longer unfortunately, but at that time, a lived experience branch. So lived experience leadership right up to executive director level in the department, and a minister and minister's office who actually really wanted to think creatively about how to make this work. So we can do these things, but we do need to do them in partnership. So what happens for people? I can't read all that. So what I'm going to do is just sort of generally walk through it with a bit of a scan. So they come to the service, firstly they approach the service. It's all self-referral. So referral can come through other health providers or through family and loved ones, but at the end of the day, the person coming in has to consent. They have to understand the model and they have to consent, and they can give us a call or an email themselves. They come into the service, they're met through a fully peer model. They go through relational kinds of conversations around safety and what their needs are. We make sure this is the right fit for them, right fit for us, and that we're all going to be able to kind of build in a way of working together. Through their stay of up to 3 weeks, they will have individualised one-on-one peer supports. They will have access to group programs, and they'll have access to a model that is built around community and connection. As they prepare to exit, we will work with them about what that looks like. We will work with them on what the pathway out looks like. We've heard from some really great models of peer-run respites in North America about having like alumni programs and things like that, so people aren't just feeling like they're disconnected from the service. So we'll be thinking about the ways that we do that, or how we extend these types of models into kind of day-to-day community programs. As I said before, the LERS is a non-coercive service. And this is where, when the rubber hits the road, people start to say, well, how do you actually do that? How do you make sure you're not using seclusion and restraint? How do you deal with challenges like medication and all the other things that go with the system as it currently is? The principles we operate from are human rights-based principles. Thank you. So they're not secondary, which they often are in the current system. They're centred. That's what we come back to. So we deal with safety and risk through a relational approach. We work with people to try and understand from them what safety looks like from them. We give clear expectations about what safety looks like for us. We work with them around what happens if they are feeling in crisis and what they want that to look like. So it's not an immediate call to 000 as much as possible. We will be managing every level of crisis and distress within this service unless the guest chooses otherwise. So we have developed a relational risk and safety model called Our Safety Together, which helps us to guide and do that. We have a process around medication where guests are responsible for their own medication. They'll have a lockbox in their room. If they don't feel safe to do that, we will work with them on an alternative approach, but it's not that they have their own autonomy around their medication. We'll do collaborative note-taking and work with them on collaborative planning. Any time of the day, we've got 2 staff on overnight, 2 active shifts overnight. Any time of the day, they can come to us and have a moment of connection and conversation. I presented this a couple of years ago. So this was a conceptual work we did around lived experience practice and governance. On the right, left view is the model that incorporates both these ideas. So the model that we're using is connection and community. Initially, and what you would read in this document, and I've seen some of them around today, is a pretty philosophical framework around what the service experience will be like for people, and that was co-designed with those most likely to use the service. And then mine's lived experience governance framework, which allows us to think about what the governance of the whole service and also some of the changes we make in the organisation looks like. This is all about grounding how you work with people through those principles of compassion, of connection, of healing, of understanding, as Tim talked about, that the nature of distress and crisis is often and regularly unhelpfully located as a problem within the individual, rather than as a result of trauma, of the systems and structures that exist around someone or their environment, their culture, their social experience. So this model here, with the backing of the peer work model that we're delivering, is about working with people in ways that incorporate that and understanding that on your worst days, What you're experiencing might just be your brain, body, mind, and soul's best way of trying to protect you. So then how do you take the conceptual, which was a big question? How are you going to do all this? Sounds amazing. What are you going to do? How are we going to get from idea into what it actually looks like? So thanks to the incredible team working on the development of this service, we've thought through this really, really deeply, because we know we will be held more accountable than anyone for how deeply we think about this and how we document this and how we deliver it. So on your left is a framework that talks about how we've developed usual systems that you would expect, but broader lived experience lens. An operational risk register, just going to cheat, built through to then looking at risks, critical incident scenarios, and looking at the responses that we would draw from, through to development of operational guidelines, and because we are a big organisation, making sure that we have review processes that ensure we're aligned with MIND's policies and procedures, or where there is any difference, that we have a clear documented agreement of why we've done that and how that fits within the legislation. What I've found really interesting about this work is the more that we went through, the deeper that we went, there's not actually that much conflict with our existing policies and procedures. It's largely interpretation and then the practice that delivers it. The exception is probably risk and risk assessments. So the little double-page form you can see there is a copy of our Safety Together safety planning approach and protocol, which will be instead of a traditional risk assessment, but is largely about the same thing. It just does it very much from a guest-led approach. Down the bottom there, you can see the escalation pathway. You probably can't really see it, but what we've done is developed a different pathway of escalation within MIND, so that every step of the way, you're escalating to someone with lived experience in leadership. So it goes, we've got a bunch of people within the lived experience division who are taking on-call responsibilities. That will go on to a general manager or senior manager level with someone with lived expertise, through to executive director where this service is involved. That will be me. So that we really try to test and ensure and look at what does a decision making look like when things get really tricky or really hard, and how do we hold the integrity of the model while keeping everyone safe. This one I love, because like down there in that yellow box is really what we're doing, guests and community. Everything around it is all the structural change and structural development we've had to do and think through to make sure that this service is protected from just diverting to status quo the moment that something doesn't go perfectly. So on your left, you'll see there the line of work we've been doing, particularly in partnership with Lived Experience Leadership and Advocacy Network, Larsen, around lived experience leadership and governance. So that's our governance framework, connection and community, our Safety Together. And we've got them working with us to kind of test how those things apply in practice. And then on the left, you've got how we're working with the current system. So we're working with the chief psychiatrist in Victoria and her team to look at how we balance usual typical system expectations of governance with enabling the lived experience model of governance, and how we do that in partnership, with the end goal being that this service has a real opportunity to try and do what it's designed to do. We're also continuing to work with our clinical partners from Stage 2 Ahmad and our local clinical partners, Ballenden Health. We're working with the Wathaurong Cooperative, the First Nations traditional custodians down there in Geelong, as well as lived experience leaders and intersectional leaders. Key principles of our governance that we've held from the beginning of Stage 2 right through to now. Minimum, it's actually 51% consumer leadership within governance structures. Sometimes means we've kind of got to bring everyone into everything a little bit, but what it has done and what we've seen it done in practice is really shift the principles of decision making that are applied, really challenge the traditional models that make decisions and the hierarchy of knowledge that can exist within our system that says one way knows more than other and is more responsible. So we're trying to balance that out. We look at the context of power within that as well and really remain very attentive to that. So what about this workforce? So the other question, where are you going to get the people to work here? What's going to happen? Peers don't do this stuff. They do now. And we're supporting them very intensively to do so. Our service manager, establishment service manager, Rana Tahuia, moved over from New Zealand, Aotearoa, to run the service. She would have been here today, but she's busy doing the work of developing this service with the team. We did intensive interview processes, really complex scenario-based processes to support the development of the team leaders and the team. We have an intensive training program that they're in at the moment, so a 7-week training program that incorporates the best of what lived experience training has to offer, and the foundation of that is intentional peer support, a globally recognised model for delivering peer support, and then other supporting programs around that, working closely with our own lived learning and development team with in mind to make sure that we're meeting all mandatory training requirements, and we're doing this blend in a way that really supports the delivery of the service model. I think I've heard it, but 24/7. So all of the peers on the roster will work 24/7, night shifts, and we'll be working across the roster so that we have equity within that. And that means that we can offer that 2 active staff available for our 9 guests at any time. It's very, very heavily evaluated, this service, before it's even started. These are all the levels of... I've just said no to any more because we can't do any more. But what we have in place is really critical. So the developmental evaluation with Larsen, we've got a partnership with the Department of Health and ourselves to do the initial testing of process and impact of the experience of guests. We will develop our own service measure outcomes through Mind, so using our usual approach to outcome measures, but applying a lived experience modelling to that, working with our research team, in particular our lived experience researchers. We're working across the Australian Psychosocial Alliance Group as part of a program around developing lived experience outcome measures that can be rolled out more broadly, which will support our work here as well. And we're speaking with the Victorian Collaborative Centre for Mental Health and Wellbeing about longitudinal work that can demonstrate the effectiveness of the model over the time and also look at how it can impact changes across the broader system. We're asking a lot of this service. So where to from here? These are some quotes from the initial design process. So when we started talking to people, what they talked about was, there's no place I feel understood by the people treating me. 2, you showed me how I can be more of myself. I understand how to hold more parts of me. I think that's what it was like meeting the peer workers, witnessing and connecting to someone I could feel in my bones, knew what it's like to go through what I've gone through. So this is what we're going to do. We open at the end of June with the first 4 beds. We open by the end of the year with the full 9 beds. We will continue to share what we're learning. We're really proud of the journey to get to this point. It has felt a little bit like a fight at times, but that's the kind of fight and courage we have to bring to genuinely achieve change. And I want to acknowledge again the work that we've done across the system and the courage of others to step into that, and also the work we've done within Mind, the courage of the board and the executive and our senior leadership to also step into the unknown, because it is hard work within all of us to challenge status quo and what we've always been told is safe, even when we know it's often harmful. Thank you.
Now, next up, we have Dr. Laura Hayes, Manager Research and Evaluation at Mind Australia, who's going to present on the research which identifies the effectiveness and strengths of recovery-based models of step-up, step-down services. This will be followed by an interactive discussion with Dr. Evelynne Tadros, CEO, Mental Health Coordinating Council, and Liam Annetts, a peer practitioner of Mind Australia, and we'll consider the models that already exist both in New South Wales and other states and what enhancements could be made. And that panel will be moderated by Denise, who will be coming back with some more poetry for us, some more songs, some more gags, some more stories from Scotland, I'm hoping. But anyway, please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Laura Hayes.
Thank you and good afternoon, and I hope you had a great lunch. It's fantastic to be back here again today. So I'm going to be talking about some of the evidence around step-up, step-down services. I'm going to be sharing a really lovely video that it gives the personal experience point of view from experiencing step-up, step-downs, and that'll be a segue to the panel discussion. What does a step-up, step-down service look like? It's a residential service that people stay for about 14 to 28 days. It provides a step down from inpatient stays or a step up from the community for more intensive support. It's got a very strong recovery orientation, and it's 24-hour support in a lovely home-like environment. Residents get access to psychosocial, peer and clinical services, which can be a really fantastic combination. There's adult versions, there's youth versions, And Mind operates 14 service sites across Australia. We've got 2 new youth services coming online in Victoria and more in the pipeline, possibly in Queensland. In Victoria, we call them prevention and recovery centres, but I think across most of Australia they'd be called step up, step downs. What's special about step up, step down? There's that holistic support. There's recovery. It's integrated with clinical support, much less restriction than an inpatient stay. It's experienced very positively by service users. It's very future oriented. So even though people might stay just for 2 weeks, it's very much setting them up for a longer term recovery journey. They're connected with supports that will help them with recovery post their stay. They start to develop goals, they start to work on those goals, and they take those goals home with them. There's access to peer practitioners, and we constantly hear how valuable the connection with peer practitioners is on a step up and step down. And the model can adapt to the local circumstances while retaining a focus on core business. So there might be more need for step-up services, there might be more need for step-down support. We're able to vary the staff composition so that we can, say, have a family engagement worker if that's what's required. But all the time we're focusing on supporting people with distress reduction and building that recovery. The evidence for them is building. They've been in operation for about 20-25 years in Australia. Mind's own research and evaluation. We've done some research into what's called relational mapping, which is a structured supervision program that helps the clinical services and the psychosocial services get on the same page in terms of delivering service. Ironbark is a really effective group program for people with emotional dysregulation. It was piloted at Austin. It's now running across multiple parks across Victoria. And that was a partnership between Mind, Spectrum and Austin Health. And also we have parks and step up, step down impact measurement. That's our key accountability to service users, to clinical partners and funders, and we probably have the largest database on parks and step up, step outcomes in Australia. There's also been some academic research that shows sustained improvements across a range of outcomes. Some of those outcomes in recovery and distress are maintained 12 months post-stay, which is really important to hear. People are less likely to use inpatient services, visit EDs or have CTOs after a stay on the parks, and that's meaningful to for many stakeholders, least of all the actual service users who really can value not needing to have to go to an inpatient stay again. Consumers and practitioners describe really meaningful experiences of recovery, and consumers consistently rate their experience positively. They value the lack of restriction. They get access to practitioners who listened, engaged, and those freewheeling, open-ended therapeutic conversations are really highly valued by residents. In terms of our own impact measurement, there was a significant reduction in distress across our parks and step up, step down stay, and that's across over 4,500 service users. So that's a really substantial finding. We find that there's gender differences when we dig in a bit more deeply. Gender diverse people come in with higher levels of distress, greater than females and males. Interestingly, everyone makes a very similar amount of level of recovery, but so gender diverse people will still exit with higher rates of distress, but they've all made a similar impact. We get consistent outcomes for First Nations service users. About 11% of our service users are First Nations people. We get consistent outcomes at exit for linguistically diverse communities, but slightly higher rates of distress in our English-speaking participants. And also greater distress for younger service users, and slightly less improvement, still quite significant, but interestingly less improvement than, say, adults might experience. In terms of recovery, again, significant increase in recovery, about 28%, and that means feeling more comfortable when around other people, feeling more support from family relationships, improvement in daily living and coping, better understanding of personal mental health, and all importantly, having hope. And also similar patterns for recovery in terms of stronger patterns with adults. Very strong regards their experience of service, having a say, feeling welcome, feeling safe, being treated with respect, and a very high Net Promoter Score. The average for the sector might be around 30%. About 68% of people would say yes, they would 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 recommend this service to a family or a friend. What I'm going to show you now, that's the facts and the figures, that's the data, but it's really illuminated by the personal experience of people who have used a parks and have perhaps even, and in this case, have come back to work in a park. And this is the story of Ashley at our Quilana Step Up, Step Down in WA.
Quilana Step Up, Step Down has made such a huge impact on my life. I can't imagine where I would be if I didn't have that stay. Quilana is an up to 30-day stay mental health service with Mind Australia. Mind is a mental health organisation with services all across Australia for people who need some support when they're going through a tough time with their mental health. And as a peer practitioner, I know what it's like to have that need. I had been unwell since I was a child. I think I ended up with something like 7 different diagnoses of mental health conditions at one point, and I didn't expect to survive my youth at all. And I was terrified that I was going to be put in hospital. And my psychologist, she was like, "There's a place that I think would be really good for you." And I didn't believe her at first. So I went in to Quilana and I was crying and I was begging them to see me outside of my diagnosis. And they said to me, "Ash, we're not going to put you in a box here. We just want to know about you and your story." And that's the first time in my life that I felt somebody really hears me and believes in me. Eventually I started sharing about what my hopes were for my future and that I wanted to be a peer worker one day. I wanted to work in mental health. But I was saying that I'm too unwell, I can't do that, I'll probably never hold a job, I'll probably never do this, never do that. And they really pulled me up and showed me that I could take back some control over my life that I didn't know I could take. And it was a peer worker who really showed me that I didn't have to be this perfectly well person to be in recovery. And she was the living proof to me that things can get better. You can go through trauma and you can live a good life. And I picked myself back up in 30 days and I applied to work here and I got the job, so it was great. I'm now a grown adult that that has a job and contributes to society. And I didn't think that was possible for me. I have a future, and I didn't see that before. So that's been profound.
That story is just very beautiful and moving, and I think it really illustrates what it's like for a person to experience the support at a Step Up, Step Down. So overall implications, PARC is really value for money and really effective. It helps people stay away from hospital. It can help free up acute care capacity. People can move to that service with less restriction. The opportunity in New South Wales is to increase access to step-up, step-down services. New South Wales lags behind Victoria, and it's been estimated about 600 to 800 beds would be an optimal investment range in New South Wales. So thank you for listening to that. I think we'll move on to the panel now with that sort of introduction to the step-up, step-down services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. As Laura says, we're now going to move on to our sub-acute panel. But I think that just watching that and watching the journey, that is now a current staff member, and there's nothing more poignant than hearing, meeting, and then hearing someone coming from a point of, I never thought I'd be well enough to be a peer worker, and I felt heard and seen for the first time. So thank you for that, Laura. The data is growing. And look, as an ED, I have felt and touched these services. We have them in many states, and they make a remarkable difference. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panel members to come up. So with us today, we have Dr. Evelynne Tadros. So we've got Dr. Evelynne Tadros. She probably needs no introduction in New South Wales, but she's quite impressive, so I'm going to give her it. So she's the CEO of the Mental Health Coordinating Council and an adjunct associate professor for psychiatry and the mental health at the University of New South Wales. Evelynne holds a doctorate of health science and a master's in child and adolescent health from the University of Sydney and serves as a board director with St Vincent de Paul Society New South Wales and the Electricity and Water Ombudsman. Despite the titles, it's her two teenage boys who reliably keep her grounded. Welcome, Evelynne. And with us today, we've got Liam Annetts. Liam is a 23-year-old from Redlands who accessed Logan Youth Step Up, Step Down service, which is the one of the 3 in Queensland, during his experiences with mental health challenges. Following this, Liam developed a strong passion for mental health, advocacy and support. This led him to study mental health and begin working as a peer worker, and he is now part of our team and a colleague as a peer worker in Logan. Congratulations, Liam. In 2025, Liam used his experiences to support and empower and advocate for other young people by speaking at the Young Persons Conference in the Gold Coast, and also last year the FEMS conference, the Envisioning 2050 conference. I was in the audience and it was very powerful. So once you've got someone who's excellent at presenting, I thought, oh, would you like to come down, Liam? So thank you, much appreciated. Liam has commenced his Bachelor of Social Work at the QUT with a strong interest in addressing systemic barriers, promoting social justice and creating positive change within the community. So welcome. So from the panel, Evelynne, I invited you onto this panel after deep dive back into New South Wales, came across the research and a link to that on your website for an evaluation that the MHCC had jointly funded. And so my first questions for you, you've long advocated for increased investment in step up, step down services across New South Wales. Why do you see these models as such a vital part of the mental health system?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to attend. Why are step-up, step-down models really important? So just for a bit of clarity, here in New South Wales, we don't use sub-acute often. We use the Prevention and Recovery Centre or step-up, step-down models just because we try and avoid the biomedical models. So sub-acute is not what we do in New South Wales. We tend to do SUDS and parks, prevention recovery centres. Before I talk a little bit about Park, I think it's really important to talk about what we're doing really well in New South Wales, and that includes things like community living supports, which from the 1st of July they'll be called CLS, community living supports, but many of you would be familiar with them as HASI, Housing Assistance Support Initiative, and we've also got HASI Plus. So it'll be CLS from the 1st of July, and then HASI and HASI Plus will still continue. SUDS, or step up, step down models, kind of sits between CLS and HASI Plus. There is one prevention and recovery centre that's run by ICLA, the Independent Community Living Australia. That's the program that we co-funded through the Community Mental Health Drug and Alcohol Research Network, which is a partnership project between Mental Health Coordinating Council and our sister peak in the drug and alcohol space, the Network of Alcohol and Drug Agencies. So we funded ICLA to do a review of their step up, step down model, which is the Prevention and Recovery Centre in Bondi. Not too dissimilar to the results that we heard earlier. There was a reduction in ED presentations by 33%, and then inpatient care was significantly reduced by 44%, and it cost a third of inpatient care. So when you see also stats and figures that satisfaction is in the 90s, why would you not want to invest in more of those community-based programs than more beds in hospital? And we know, and Tim spoke so eloquently before about the trauma that is experienced when there's police interactions and when there's ED presentations. So we absolutely call for more of those programs. And the why, I guess, is the proof is in the pudding. When you get people's lived experience who are seeing the value of those programs, are benefiting holistically, not just in terms of their mental health recovery, but getting daily assistance or learning daily skills. They're being supported through employment. All that psychosocial support that we often talk about is, it's not just about mental health recovery. You need to support the whole person, everything that they bring as they walk through the doors.
Yeah. Oh, woo! We're getting a woo woo. Thank you, Evelynne. And, you know, I've seen that, as I said, firsthand. And a couple of our speakers today have made comment, Tim, you in particular, around the environment and how important the environment is. And that's something for consideration, is having purpose built, you know, and co-designed with lived experience sitting at the table. So, Evelynne, I'm going to come to you again, and then I'll bring you in, Liam. If step up, step down services were more widely available across New South Wales, what do you think the key difference would be for people experiencing mental health challenges as well as for our broader system?
I think for the individuals, all the stuff I said about they're getting the psychosocial support needs, the support with daily living. I mean, the images shown before about people just being able to access a garden and get therapy through just being outdoors. You know, often in the workforce, we talk about less screen time, more green time. It's no different for anyone who's experiencing mental health challenges. Throughout today, we've also heard a little bit about artistic expression, whether that's through art, music, poetry, whatever it is that supports that person and their individual needs. So for the individual, it's paramount. It's supporting their recovery-oriented, trauma-informed approach, where in community you probably have more space and time to do that. Whereas when you're in ED and in that environment, if anyone has been in ED in the last 3 months compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago, I've had the lived experience of that myself, and it is horrific. Why would anyone want to go to ED? ED is the last place you want to go unless it is life-threatening. But that's often where a lot of people who are at their wits' end up, but it's not the best of environments to be in. It doesn't help with recovery. If anything, it just exacerbates. So the potential for individuals to grow and flourish and heal in these step-up, step-down models is paramount. And for the system, well, you're not bottlenecking ED, you know, with mental health, people with mental health challenges who could be better supported in the community sector, the cost efficiency that we've already spoken about. And then I'd probably just throw in the word integration. You just need to make sure that as much as they're available, the ideal in New South Wales is that you have a step-up, step-down model that is consistently known. Unfortunately, what we have here in New South Wales, while we've got the one ICLA step-up, step-down model run through ICLA, there are a couple of other step up, step down models run through LHDs, but they're all called something different. So you wouldn't know that they're step up, step down models. So the ideal in New South Wales would be to have that step up, step down, as I believe they have in Victoria, that is known throughout. So there's the system benefit of less fragmentation, so people know where to go. It's a bit like the safe havens that we have here in New South Wales now. You know that if you're feeling suicidal, that's where to go to in New South Wales. You know that if you need longer term or medium term, up to 28 days or 30 days, that you go to step up, step down. So it's that systematic understanding of where to go when you're at a point in need. It's that right service, right place, right time, and just having that all integrated. So that's why the word integrated just comes to mind.
I think that's a very valid point, because what we're progressing in some of the services areas nationally is where we've got safe havens, or as they're rebranded as crisis support spaces, that there's a direct referral to the SUDS model if people are representing, so that it's totally that hospital avoidance. And I was interested in hearing Evelynne make that connection, is how do we get that to the policymakers? Because I've heard you, Evelynne, you've been banging on that door saying we need this model in New South Wales. That connection around it will help with ramping. It will help with your ED KPIs and your stats and your... So any ideas? Because I think we heard Rose had a bit of an appetite today, which I'm sure Amy was thrilled about at some point. So
yeah, I guess it's because we're drumming it in. So every opportunity we have, we are including it in our pre-budget submissions. Any of the briefings that we give to the Minister or her advisors, it is inclusive of doubling the community living supports program, because we love that program. We just need more people to access it. It is including increasing the capacity for parks. And our election campaigning is already well underway, and that includes meeting, as you would have heard, at our CEO forum a couple of weeks ago. I think that was last week, but it's all a bit of a blur. That we're already speaking to all sides of politics to make sure that they're clear about what our expectations, what our need is in the community. Just I think also being clear about the messages. And I know this simplifies things and dumbs things down a little bit, but the hashtags and the executive summary and the executive messaging, where it's very clear when you talk about park in Bondi, it costs a third of inpatient care, it reduces ED presentations by 33% and inpatient admissions by 44%. So really clear, succinct messaging about what it is that these programs achieve, because Treasury loves that stuff if there's a saving, but also just being really clear with the Minister. I mean, you heard her portfolio from water and electricity to homelessness, youth, and of course mental health. It's a saturated market, so she gets inundated with requests. I think the Treasurer said that he received 1,000 pre-budget submissions that got to his desk, so to speak. So you can imagine the cull before that. So being really clear in our message of why we think this works, and lived experience is front and centre. It's their messaging of we believe this works, and we've heard the experience of their shared experience, and so just lifting that voice where they're not potentially able to get to the Minister or to Treasurer.
So you heard, Evelynne, hashtag hit the Minister, saving in costs, saving in outcomes. Thank you so much. So thanks for your response, because they were more in that line of system and policy. Liam, we're going to come to you now. Now, you've experienced these services firsthand, as we said in your bio, and you now work within one of these services as a peer practitioner. Would you be comfortable sharing a little about your journey and what the transition has meant for you?
Yeah, well, I was 17 when I first accessed the service. I was referred there by a psychiatrist who came off of my complaining about like a lack of support I received as services. I sort of went through a multiple psychologist, psychiatrist, and I had multiple inpatient unit stays that were involuntary. So they decided to take me to step up, step down, which similar to the video at first, I was like, I don't think that's going to help. But I went there and it was quite good. It was amazing, actually. I interacted with peer workers for the first time there. I had never met a peer worker previously. I guess it was a bit eye-opening in the sense that It was just, I've never had someone share their lived experience. It felt like a bit of a foreign world. I think the thing that really stuck out to me, which may not stick out to a lot of people, was when I first interacted with a peer worker and he asked me if I wanted to play Xbox with him. And I was like, yeah, I really do want to do that. And it was just really, like, I just never had that sort of experience. It really mellowed me out. I think the transition to becoming a peer worker inspired a lot through that peer worker that I'd met. Him sharing his experience made it sort of comfortable for me to share my experience. I was sort of the only one in my friend group who was going through this sort of stuff, so I was quite like, and I guess being a young man, I was like, oh, I can't share what I'm going through. But him sharing that was very eye-opening for me. So I followed through on his resources and, yeah, I decided to study. Being on the other side it was very weird at first. I felt a bit like imposter syndrome a little bit, like I wasn't used to doing that. But now I think it's a great opportunity because I can teach other young people what I have been through, and some of the stuff that I thought was hard, so they could try and avoid that now, I guess, since I've been through it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's just incredible, and the importance of the role modelling and working with a peer. We hear that a lot, particularly in our youth step up, step downs, because, and Liam, you and I spoke about this at the conference, that you were that used of the doctor telling you what was wrong with you rather than someone sitting saying, what's going on for you, buddy? Talk to me. So it was an interesting exchange. From your perspective, Liam, what is it about peer work and lived experience that makes such a meaningful difference in the step up, step down setting?
That's a very difficult question to ask in the sense of how do I shorten my answer, because there's a lot that makes it great. I think the huge difference for me was the relatability. And I guess looking from my own sense as a worker now, I know how difficult entering a service can be and how important first impressions are. So I guess as lived experience workers, we can really try to build that connection early, to sort of set up further for the stay. I guess the importance of peer work is really just the person-centered practice and the recovery focus that you'll get. We build a lot of connections where you feel comfortable enough to be able to speak about certain topics that you may not with other workers. I guess it's just really that focus on, like, bringing the human to a connection. Also, you got to stay within your certain mandatory boundary, like your boundaries and everything. But
Gold star. Late answer.
But you obviously want to be as human as possible, like in the most if my manager's watching, in the most boundary driven way possible. I try to treat the youth that I work with just like they were like my friends, or if they were like me when I was in school, sort of thing, with boundaries.
Good catch. Love it.
I hope they're peer boundaries and not just...
No, they're peer boundaries. Yeah.
See, Janet's on to you. Thank you so much, Liam. I think that just hearing, because we hear about boundaries a lot, don't we, is that the peer workers, they don't keep boundaries, and that's absolute nonsense in the peer boundary framework for you. We also spoke about that last year and around, I'm sharing my story and I've had training to do it, and it's not around me sharing the story rather than listening to someone else's story. It's to make that connection. And I'm hearing a lot of word human today. Imagine that. Coming from human beings to other human beings. Thank you. So to both panellists, what do you think community managed, recovery orientated services do particularly well that have lived experience and peer worker at the centre of them that they may not experience elsewhere in the system?
I know that there are peer workers who work in the public system here, and I know some of those peer workers have worked across both public and community, and I hope they share my view, and that is that I think when you're working in NGO land, there is far more flexibility, and you're just not caught up in the bureaucratic system. I'm trying to be really politically correct in saying it, but I do think it is easier working in the NGO sector. So, and obviously I'm the CEO for a peak that looks after the CMO sector. So, I rally the thinking and the support around community managed organisations and what they do. So the flexibility, that human, you're not a number, you are a person who needs the care and support that can be offered. And I know you made the comment about purpose-built facilities as well. In Sydney, that can be harder when you're in the inner west, and you're in places like Bondi or Surrey Hills. It just isn't as much opportunity for purpose-built facilities. But the way that community can build those facilities that are embedded in culture, First Nations culture. If you look at some of the sites that are coming up new, they're in old buildings, but they're refreshed and they're culturally inclusive, and they're in the right places for some of the culturally and linguistically diverse communities. They're in the right place in the right suburbs so that they're more accessible to those local communities. So I can't even remember the question. I think I've just rambled. So over to you, Liam.
I think this question sort of makes me think of, like, in terms of like a step up, step down compared to maybe like a psychologist appointment or like a hospital visit. And I think the main difference that always sticks out to me is just like the autonomy that they give to the service user and the connection built. Like Denise said earlier, it's more about like, I guess it's more looking forward rather than like risk management. It's a bit of like we're here alongside you. If we can help you to get somewhere, we can help you, but it's not like it's always future focused, which I think is great. I think that would be my main thing that would encapsulate that.
I think the other thing to think about is a lot of these grassroots community organisation came up with the approach, the theory, the ways of working, and it is adopted eventually by government. So a couple of things come to mind. Mental Health Coordinating Council is also a registered training organisation. So 10 years we have developed the certificate for in peer work. We developed that 10 years ago last year. So we were world leaders in that space in terms of developing it, getting it on scope, and then rolling it out. We think about trauma-informed care, and I've got my colleague Corinne Henderson here. 20 years ago when she first started, that was the stuff she was pushing, and it was only later that government picked it up and ran with it. The peer work framework that the Minister was talking about at the moment, that was developed for public peer workers. It wasn't very inclusive of the CMO peer workers, but that's a discussion that's ongoing at the moment. So grassroots community organisations and those local community things that have been established, it's from those that the small things, big things have grown. So, go the CMOs.
Yeah. So I'm happy to move to questions. Okay, we've got a few hands up. Wait, in the back, yep. Winners or grinners? Hand was up first.
Sorry, I've got to pick this. The idea of peer works, the idea of alternate play is in Western Sydney, our facility is 176 years of psychiatric care, Cumberland Hospital. One of the most rewarding parts of the Cumberland Hospital is the Wisteria Gardens, which are Edwardian gardens that were planted by the medical superintendent in the 1830s. We're going to lose that. We won't be able to escape for 20 minutes, half an hour gatekeep to get out of the locked units because we're being moved to a 10-storey purpose-built facility. We've lost the CHIPS program, which was an acronym for Housing Implementation Program, which was a stepped up and stepped down model, which was funded by New South Wales Health, set up in the 80s. We had a symposium, Anthony's here, where we had two events, one on the Saturday at the Lions Den, one on the Tuesday at the Parramatta Town Hall, asking the powers to be, what are you going to do delivering psychiatric care, both community and thing? The safe havens are great, but They're only limited operation hours. You've got to look at the peers program that Professor Anthony Harris, who's our president, is about. That's basically a program that's non-hospital based for young people from 12 to 24. Where we seem to be going back to the medical model instead of looking at the non-medical model. We're also transferring funding. I had members, and one's actually here, who were, when the Pathways to Living in the Community and the HASI Plus, we had a place called Irene Lou, which was a step down from CHIPS to go in. I had 3 or 4 of my members become homeless due to funding changes simply because the funding that was actually supporting them wasn't available.
So can I bring you back to a question and frame that into, is that a question for the
Question
panel of how do we prevent going back to the medical model and losing all our evidence-based practice?
It's talking about the transferring of funding from state to NGOs to federal. We've seen so much of it happen. I've only been part of the Parramatta community 25 years, and the amount of funding changes I've seen in that short time, as a member said, if we get a new team leader and things change or policies change, you completely are changing the outlook of a service. We've seen that. When the NDIS came, one of the programs completely disintegrated and the clients that could access it.
And I don't think you're alone in that feeling. I think we've all lived through that wheel. Evelynne, you want to
A couple of things to comment. I totally, and we, MHCC, totally agree with you around safe havens. That's another advocacy point for us is increase the hours of operation to 7 days a week and, ideally 24/7 and just put more of them in different locations. So that's a safe haven comment. I can't comment on infrastructure in New South Wales infrastructure, health and what the decisions they make. That's probably a question better suited for government. And the third one around going back to the future, I think that's probably my biggest frustration point right now, particularly given Minister Butler's NDIS announcements where we know the reality at the moment. He's only talking about 160,000 people leaving the NDIS and psychosocial safe. Well, that's a load of nonsense because we know that people are already not able to access the NDIS. There are people being kicked off the NDIS and there are people's plans being reduced. And so now I just reviewed the Thriving Kids tender documents yesterday. And, they're setting up parenting programs and play groups. I closed those programs when ADAC, the Ageing and Disability Home Care Department in New South Wales, closed because they had to put those funding into the NDIS. So there is a lot of going back to the old ways of working. We know nationally we had Partners in Recovery and FAMS. They closed to fund the NDIS that we are now being asked to better support. So I totally hear you. We are trying to do as much advocacy as we can around that. And I'll just put in a plug that we also just released our foundational supports paper that we did with the National Disability Services, and we've got a webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks. You can find all the details on our website.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Evelynne. Have we got time for another question? Just one more? Yep. Thank you.
Not about Callan Park.
No,
Good.
It's not.
Between Cumberland and Callan Park.
Oh, God. Shared resources for social enterprises and the peer-led movement I am fully in support of. And if it means Callan Park, it's essential. But I wasn't going to talk about that. What I was going to talk about is I was trained as a counselling psychologist, fully registered, and then came and studied visual arts here in Sydney. And what I am most concerned about is we have a real opportunity for reform here, and it's not satisfying to me to consider that we are going to alter bits of New South Wales mental health. I think we really do need to push forward on community-controlled organisations, community-managed, and I really fully in support of Evelynne and the Coordinating Council for the amount of training, over 1,000 lived and learned experience personnel. So my point is we knew decades ago, we were supposed to provide multidisciplinary mental health. We didn't do that. We had psychiatry at the top, and we whittled away the psychosocial aspect of support and rehab, which was what I was involved with decades ago. We whittled it away. So I don't accept that we should be stepping back to step up, step down, or basically the hospital's in the middle and we're helping the hospital, both sides. No, get the system right and get what the peer-led movement actually need. So any move that reduces coercion and hospitalisation and police involvement, we have Judy Deakin here, initiating for the first responders alternative practices, commend her. The more we drive down that, the better. So step up, step down is a bit better, but I'd say we have too great an opportunity to actually get the real reform we need, which is community controlled. They need to be funded, they need to be supported, they need minimal rent, and they need the getting the training, and we need more boots on the ground to do it. Yeah.
Hallelujah, sister. Thank you so much. I've just been told we do actually have more time. I thought that I was being hurt. I've got 5 minutes, okay. This table here, yeah. Thank you.
Question predominantly, but not necessarily solely for Liam. Thank you for your share. That was fascinating and really enriching as well. I'm wondering from your perspective, what kind of conversations you might have when supporting people within a team, where the team is made up of an emerging peer practitioner workforce, working closely alongside a greater team with people that are not, at least for now, necessarily in identified or explicit peer roles, both to explain your way of working and also to ensure that those people who are not yet or may choose not to take that path are feeling equally valued when supporting our people.
Sure. Can I elaborate? Are you referring to, I guess, working with clinicians that may not be in a lived experience aspect, or working alongside other mental health practitioners who...
Supporting consumers, and specifically in my example, working with mental health carers.
Right.
So frontline good people.
Yeah. I guess if I was to... In terms of with other mental health workers, I think in like my organization, like there's only 2 peer workers and there's maybe about 10 to 12 mental health practitioners. I think a lot of it depends on the situation, obviously, but a lot of the time I have these chats with other workers is normally when it comes down to like overnight risk, when there's no other people on, I tend to try and ground every situation in the fact of like remembering who the consumer may be in the sense, and always to focus on the person-centered care, because a lot of the time these mental health practitioners can be very like, what if Queensland Health doesn't like my decision? And it's like I don't care I don't care about if they like the decision or not. Sorry, that's like just being honest. And I guess my point is I try to always bring it back to, rather than thinking of it from a theoretical perspective or a book perspective, I like to think of it from the basis of like a human connection perspective. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Cute.
Yes, we'll come here. Thank you.
Thank you. In New South Wales at the moment, there's an inquiry into supported decision-making, which is quite likely to be embedded in legislation. I just wanted to ask Liam whether supported decision-making is something that has been rolled out in terms of training in Queensland, and or has that affected the way that you work as a peer worker? Because certainly at MHCC we've rolled out a lot of training to workers in New South Wales, and they found that extremely useful in supporting people to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, in the sense of making decisions for ourselves. Like I know I have been I was involved in the training that was mentioned earlier, the IPS, like the intentional peer support training, which was a huge help in terms of being able to make like decisions on the floor and being able to stand firm as a peer worker. In terms of making decisions in respect of like service delivery perspective, that has been integrated into our service to a degree. It's not really, it's still at a baby stage, an early stage.
I think talking about relation to you supporting the people you're working with in supported decision making, you using that skill to help them make decisions for themselves. I wasn't really talking about you decision making. It's about the skill of supported decision making.
Can I maybe help here?
Yeah, maybe I just misunderstood the question. I apologise.
Sorry, perhaps I didn't ask it.
Can I do a quick poll? Who understands the supported decision-making approach? Just hands up if you know what that's about. Not even a quarter in the room. So I think that just speaks to, anyway, supported decision-making is the new trauma-informed, or the addition to trauma-informed. Trauma-informed was an approach that took us a long time to understand conceptually what that means and then how to embed it in practice. Supported decision-making is the next level of an approach to better, within a human rights context, support people with lived experience. So it's about getting, so if I'm working with my mum, I'm actually helping her to make the right decisions for herself, not enforcing the decisions I think are best for her. So it's really interesting to do that poll because, again, we talk about these community grassroots approaches that we think are important in terms of maximising human rights and person-centred approaches. But, sorry, I've overtaken the poll.
I don't know. I think it's a fair response because it's actually come out of disability and come out of Adults with Capacity Act in the UK. So, and it is actually a capacity assessment needs to determine if someone's under the Act. But what we do in Queensland is that as part of that, as we provide the information and then the peer worker or in the approach, any worker within the service, so say this is the information and then what's the consequence of the decision that you'll make. We don't have any control in the service and the SUDS, for example, if the psychiatrist comes in and says, no, that's not, they could utilise the Act, and it does happen. So
and that's what we're changing in New South Wales.
And that's what needs to change. Absolutely. So, and I'm sure you've been in that situation, Liam, where you don't agree with the clinical decision of the doctor because that's not what the client wants. But at the same time, we've got to work in partnership and the doctor's the doctor. Yeah, from a governance point of view.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Sorry. It seems like a bit of a talk around like dignity of risk in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I might have misunderstood your question.
Maybe
different frame,
Thank you.
Of course. We don't have to do what the doctor says.
Yeah.
Australia is a signatory to UN conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And the UN conventions we're signatory require people to make their own decisions wherever and however possible. And this talk is to nowhere because we're already obligated to do this, and people who don't understand it. We've been discussing this in Australia in great detail at Commonwealth level and state level since the early 90s.
Yep.
Now, all that work's been just seemingly swept under the carpet. Let's start and do it again, which is what mental health does all the time. We just decide things, we get there, and then 10 years later, you know what we should be discussing. We should be, and I'm just sick of these circular conversations. Our energy is going nowhere, and nobody is getting educated with it. So there.
There you go, Janet. Thank you, Janet.
Could I just say that to me, the key word in all of this is support. We need to support. We need the workers and the peer workers to support each other. And we need people to understand and the government to know, and I'm working on that quite well,
that they need to put money into the right places instead of keeping the money and the funding for their own little box ends.
Thank you. We need more. Always need more funding, guys. I think that's us. I think we're actually out of time. Are we out of time? We are. I'm getting. She's cracking the whip. But thank you so much, and thanks to our panel members, Evelynne and Liam. Thank you.
So I'm going to take you through a very fast presentation about the havens in mostly in Victoria, but 2 coming in New South Wales and 1 in Adelaide. So in the havens, we provide integrated housing and support for people who are living with long-term mental health challenges and psychosocial disability. And it's not just housing, it's housing with support and with community. And I want to give you some stories and some data about how it changes people's lives. Now, some people are more persuaded by stories, and they're human and they're people's voices and they're really important. And other people, like the psychiatrists at the Royal College conference a couple of weeks ago, are more persuaded by data. And the truth is both things are important. We know that housing insecurity impacts people's mental health, and we know that people experiencing severe mental health challenges experience more insecure housing and more homelessness. They are often in very casual housing arrangements. They're often victimised and exploited, and they're often not safe. And that issue of safety comes up here over and over again. Lots of studies have shown this. The Australia's seminal survey of high-impact psychoses highlighted the risks and challenges associated with the insecure housing that people experience. So let me tell you a bit about the Haven residences. They are self-contained apartments. People are living in their own safe, long-term, secure apartment. They pay rent. They are tenants like anyone else. There's about 12 to 14 apartments together, and there are communal areas sorry, I've gone too far. There are communal areas downstairs that people can choose to share together. These are not like group homes where people have to share living and cooking spaces and sometimes also bathrooms. People have the independent choice of how they go about interacting as part of a community. And like any group of people, some people spend more time together and make friends than others. How they differ from some of the generic models like Housing First in the US and UK is that they provide both a combination of long-term stable housing and on-site support. The issue of community and building friendships is entirely up to people. It is almost a byproduct of the model, but it happens constantly. And one of the things that people talk about is a reduction in loneliness. When I talk to people about what's important to them about living in a haven, almost universally they will say, I've got safe housing. Almost universally, they will either say second, and I get support when I need it, for when, in Janet's terms earlier this morning, people feel they're sliding. And then they will say, and I don't feel so lonely. The issue of loneliness comes up again and again. Who can access the havens? People experiencing severe long-term mental health challenges. The majority of our residents are currently NDIS participants, people eligible for social housing, and people between 18 and 64 ages. And you can see there just some pictures to get in your mind of what havens look like. All the apartments have access to private outdoor space. They all have a balcony. They all have some private outdoor space as well as communal outdoor space. So what's some of the evidence about the changes in people's lives? In a recent evaluation, our research team, led by Laura Hayes, who you heard from earlier, analysed data from 273 Haven residents who had an average age of 41 years, and we tracked their recovery over the first 2 years after they moved in. This is just Audrey's story, and I haven't got time to read it out. It's got a lot on this slide. But the important thing about Audrey's story is that once she felt safe in her housing, once she felt she had some connection, you can see what she talks about then going on to tackle in her life. And often those things are often put to people. You've got to give up smoking, and you've got to try and find a job. You've got to do a whole range of things. That's very hard to do if you don't know where you're going to live and you don't feel safe. So we looked at hospitalisation in the 12 months before and after entry into the Haven in 103 residents who provided that data. And the result shows a 70% reduction in mental health related hospital days. So that is a drop from an average of 17 days in a 12-month period to just 5 days. And what that really reflects is not that people don't have those moments where they slide, to quote Janet from this morning again, because it made a big impact on me. People don't have to hide when they feel that they're sliding. People get the support they need for that not to result in going to hospital. And again, there you can see some comments from our residents. This slide shows the trajectory analysis, so the total scores from the 4 mental health recovery questions. I told you I'm going to talk data for the people in the room that care about data. And as shown on this graph, we identified 2 distinct mental health recovery trajectory groups. The grey line shows the steady trajectory group, and that included 82% of residents who experienced consistently stable recovery over the 2-year period. The important words there are consistently stable. You know from all your collective experience in this room that most people don't have stable recovery. They go up, they go down, they slide, they have all sorts of challenges. The important thing here is people, once they were stable, they continued to be. They started with a relatively high recovery score and it improved in a small amount over a period of time. But the blue line shows the growth trajectory group, which included 18% of residents who experienced a steady improvement in recovery over the 2-year period. And women and young people under 40 were more likely to be in this group. So what does all this mean? It means that havens support people to maintain their well-being over time. And if you think about Audrey's story, all the things they go on to do with that. Think about Emily's story, having friends over, cooking a meal, all the things that are very hard to do when you're in crisis or you don't have stable housing. And in contrast to the research that shows that recovery for people with severe psychosocial disability is very rarely steady and most often has frequent ups and downs, in contrast to that, our stable recovery pathways show that with the right support, people can experience fewer fluctuations over time and can actually minimise that most significant consequence of those fluctuations being hospitalised in an unplanned or involuntary way. And the 3 things, whether it's in the data or whether it's in the qualitative feedback or whether it's in the discussions with people, the 3 things that come up over and over again is, I have somewhere to live and it's mine. I've got friends. I don't feel so lonely. And I get support when I need it, and that support is helping me to do the things that I choose to do. So those are the things that matter the most. And I'm going to finish with this short video from Gregory, who's a resident at our haven in Pakenham. I should have added, we've got about 180 people now in Victoria living in haven homes. We'll shortly open one in Clearview, and we have commitment from Minister Jackson and the New South Wales Government to build 2 here in New South Wales, and we hope to expand even further. So Gregory is sharing for you, to finish this, how Haven has improved his sense of safety, independence, connection and recovery.
My name is Greg Driver, 66 years old. Currently residing in Haven, Pakenham. Prior to coming here, I was living by myself. So if you got unwell or things went wrong, you had no backup. And that's something that we've got here. It's good. It's a safe place. We've got supports if we need it. We live independently in our own units, so you don't feel crowded. It's probably the best bet. Yeah. For me, it's the feeling of safety. I suppose it would change with different people, but personally, the feeling of safety. Yeah, if you need help, it's here. You've got qualified mental health staff. Non-intrusive. If you don't want the help, or if you don't want the staff to, help you at all, they don't. But if you ask for help, it's there. Yeah, it's something I got involved in after I finished work. I needed something to fill my time in. I started gardening, found out I enjoyed it. So I look after the gardens here at Haven. I do the groups, but I'm not a pool player. The pool table, initially the first pool table we got, my sister and I brought. And then one of the Haven residents, updated it and brought a better table. So cooking's another thing that I enjoy. And walking, it's just something to free my mind. If it wasn't for the community groups, I'd probably spend more time in my unit. Prior to coming in here, I was hospitalised for 5 months. It was just a mental health issue. But since I've been out of hospital and here at Haven, I seem to have settled down. Like I said, we all live in our own individual units. We're all responsible for our own well-being. There's staff backup if we need it. It's just it's a place of safety for all of us, I believe.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for inviting me along. I must say I feel a bit overwhelmed with all the expertise and experience in the room, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Community Living Services, CLS, HASI, Housing and Accommodation Support Initiative. It's been quite a journey for me personally as a researcher. We started doing this work on these types of initiatives in the early 2000s, and so we can see over the 25 years how much it's changed and expanded. My colleagues in the team that have worked on these projects include people with lived experience, including Perry O'Shea, who many of you will be familiar with. Unfortunately, Perry gives her apologies today. She would really have liked to have been here.
and many other lived experience researchers in the team, and their names are acknowledged at the end. So what I'm going to talk about today really is quite a different model to the one that we've just heard about. And I think one of the reasons that I've been invited to speak is to think about what are the range of types of housing and housing support that we need so that we can reach as many people as need support for their housing and somewhere safe and where they live and can thrive and have social connections. So CLS HASI, and currently its partner program HASI Plus, which is more intensive community mental health and housing. They're programs to support people with severe mental health conditions so that they can live and participate in the community in the way that they want to. So there's a huge variety of how people receive their support, but the four essential parts of these programs are that they receive psychosocial support from community managed organisations. They receive tenancy support, generally from either from that same organisation or from a community housing provider. They are connected with their clinical mental health services from their local health district or from a private provider. And they receive support to access and maintain secure housing. So it's a variation on what we've spoken about already, housing first. Housing first in a context of shortage of housing means that we need to think about a range of types of houses. So HASI, when it first started, there was housing provided and you could stay in that housing for as long as you want. Now housing is where you are now if you want to stay there, or helping you find housing either on the on social housing, affordable housing, or private market. One of the differences with this program is that it is a statewide service in New South Wales. And so it's delivered in partnership between the government and, as I said, community managed organisations. So some of those are about mental health, but others are about employment or housing or social connections. So it's thinking about how do you provide housing and housing support in a way that means your life is meaningful, that you're not just about being safe, it's about the opportunities to actually thrive from there. Interestingly for me, now on average, people stay in the program, as in this type of support particularly, for only about 11 months. Some people, of course, are there for a lot longer because their needs continue to be unstable, but many of them move on to using other types of supports in our community, just as all of us do. So one of the reasons for thinking about CLS HASI is that it has been evaluated, as I said, for over 20 years in its various forms. And as we heard on the Harvard example, there are very measurable changes when you provide someone with secure housing and support to live in that housing. One of the differences here is those two types of support are not necessarily by the same provider. And for those of you who are involved in disability support more generally, you'll understand that under NDIS, that's been and prior to that, that it was one of the big changes that came about, understanding that actually most of us move houses during our lifetime, but when we move, we don't want to lose our housing support. So thinking about how do we make sure that our choices about where we live and who supports us are not remain in our control. So the changes then that we've seen through the evaluations are about health and well-being, of course, mental health, being able to measure increased in people's well-being and quality of life, sustained decreases in hospital admissions and length of stay, and less need for community mental health services where people feel that they don't need them any longer, or they need less of it. The big one, of course, is the housing itself. And so one of the participants said, yes, it helped me with the forms, the housing forms. We got a house straight away within 2 months of being in Hassie. We've been here for 9 years. It's pretty cool. So housing then, we can see, has improved through support with applications to either private providers or to community providers. And about 28% of the consumers moved onto a housing list or actually got housing while they were in the program. And they had an average wait time of just under 10 months, which is substantially less than normal wait times in New South Wales are usually at about 10 to 12 years at the moment. The other area, of course, that we measured change was about meaningful activity, so that might have been work or training or social engagement. And in the best cases, people made choices about being economically involved as well. So one of the participants said, for example, I got a job when I was with CLS Hassie. It's a job in a factory. I've been working there for about 2 years. I really enjoy it, and I'm doing something with my time. Interestingly too, of course, as we all know, mental and physical health are related, and so the physical health for some people improved on some aspects. And partly this is because of the type of support that they receive around shopping and cooking and physical activities and medical appointments that aren't actually related to their mental health. From a government perspective too, making sure that the contact with the criminal justice system has decreased was quite an extraordinary result, with almost no new charges in the criminal justice system or community corrections orders, which for this group of people who have come from homelessness or from long-term inpatient care was an enormous outcome. I think one of the reasons I've been invited along is to think about a range of ways of providing housing support. So on the panel, I'm very interested to hear your comments and questions about what does this sort of integrated low-level type or time-limited type of support mean. When we evaluated Hassie last time, it was nearly 6,000 people had been through the program that we're involved with. And so to think about, well, how are you reaching that scalability and that use of the multiple types of supports in our community? Thank you.
Just while they're moving to the stage, I'll start just by introducing Olav, although I think he's had quite a lot of media attention in New South Wales, so us Sydney-based people are quite familiar with his name. So Professor Olav Nielssen is a psychiatrist with appointments to Macquarie University and the Mind Spot Clinic. Most importantly, over his career, he's maintained a weekly clinic at the Matthew Talbot Hostel, which is, for those of you who are from outside of Sydney, is a focus for the homelessness services in Sydney. His extensive research interests include pathways in and out of homelessness, and most importantly, he's the founder of the Habilis housing model. And welcome, Humair. We haven't met yet, but I hear that you're also a housing expert. So Humair has a background as a social and affordable housing specialist, an architect and an urban planner, so that's always good to have in the discussion, and is responsible for the delivery of a range of crisis, transitional housing, homelessness, social and affordable housing programs in New South Wales. So I think we have 3 very exciting panellists here, and I have a few questions I'm going to just seed the conversation with. But if people have got questions, we have hopefully a little bit of time to get some questions from the room as well. So I'm going to start with Olav. Have you got a microphone?
Yes, I do.
Oh, well done. Okay, we're good. So the first question is really, I'm sure the room would like to hear a little bit about your Habilis housing here in Sydney. We know that following the recent Bondi inquiry, both Habilis and housing were mentioned in the media as potential long-term solutions for managing the crises we have with looking after people with complex mental health issues and homelessness. So would you be able to briefly describe the Habilis housing.
Yeah, of course. It's, well, firstly, Humair has been a great supporter of it, so in materially and in morally. But look, it's not it's not rocket science. It's actually very like Haven. We've taken a lot of inspiration from Alan Fells and taken previous ministers down to see Haven 1 at South Yarra, and but I also did a clinic at ICLA at Roscoe Street, which is just a block of flats. With frequent flyers from the old Caritas, where I was a trainee psychiatrist, and they never went back to hospital because there was a clinic attended there, and the clinic was where you pulled up a roller door and there was 2 plastic chairs and a table. But the point is that people continued to have treatment, so there's continuity of care. I mean, in 2026, the standard that Haven sets of having your own individual unit with your own individual bathroom and a little kitchenette and some communal supports, I think, is the correct model. That was the main problem with ICLA Roscoe Street, was you have 3 people sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, which was not quite satisfactory. But look, there's no one model. For the HASI's great if you've got a little bit more independence, but if you need the cluster of support and the support services on site, Habilis is what I've concluded after seeing Haven and working in ICLA and doing the clinic at the Matthew Talbot for 20 years and seeing how people have coped with public housing and backpackers and sleeping in the domain. I think that's where I came to the idea.
And from your experience, I think you've been open, is it about a year or more?
Year and a half, now getting on to 2 years.
Yeah, what's the experience of the residents? I mean, obviously it would be ideal to have someone speaking on behalf of them, but from your experience and knowledge?
Well, it was on Channel 9. One of our residents was pretty eloquent, I thought, but and very similar model, very similar stories to Greg actually, and the Channel 9 was quite like Greg's account. I mean, a pretty stable cohort. We've had a couple of people leave because of relapse into methamphetamine use, which is so very simple criteria. You have a mental illness requiring treatment, you're happy to be adherent to medication, and you're free of drugs and alcohol, because that ruins it for everybody else. Other than that, and perhaps a little bit of living skills, you've got to be able to look after your own apartment with supports.
Right. Okay, Humair, welcome. Really keen. Okay, we've got a microphone. Yep. So can you speak to the work that Homes New South Wales is doing on social housing and homelessness, particularly for people living with mental health challenges? I know you work closely with New South Wales Health, and so this is not just your work, but also the work of New South Wales Health. But what do you think the housing sector in New South Wales needs so that people experiencing mental health challenges can have access to the range of safe and supported housing that we've talked about today?
No, absolutely. I think based on the work that's recently happening in Homes New South Wales, as you all know, we have a Homes for New South Wales plan that's building nearly 8,400 dwellings. We have a homelessness strategy. So there's a strong focus. And, after a very long time, we've had a significant budget allocation as well. So we are focusing a lot on supply. But specific to for consumers that are or tenants who have a mental illness or mental health issues, they obviously, in the system, there is a priority attached to any health condition. So they obviously get definitely a priority in terms of allocation. I think I heard, Karen, you've mentioned that a lot of those clients that were HASI participants actually got housed very quickly. And I think that's probably a function also of help in navigating a very complex access system, but also the fact that there is a priority attached to anybody with health issues. So as you mentioned, we have a long-standing relationship with New South Wales Health around HASI. We've done many years. We've done we implemented HASI. I think some of the new stuff we've done is with Olav around Habilis. So I think as a government, as a department, we are very keen to support models that support a full spectrum of client need. And as Olav also said, that for some clients, HASI is a perfect solution. For some, there might be more support needed. And if you look at the typical social housing product or any housing product that we administer, it relies on somebody who can maintain a tenancy with or without support. So there is a degree of independence that's needed to maintain a tenancy. And often we see, and look, the system is constrained at all levels, right? Whether it's housing or mental health or whatever. And often we see a lot of clients that are in social housing but are not adequately supported. And that's where, you get into a lot of other issues around tenancies being at risk. And so the focus for us at the moment is, of course, building that we're doing at a very large scale, which gives options to all clients, including clients with mental health issues. We are also focusing on local collaboration. So we are setting up, as part of a homelessness strategy, a lot of local collaboration networks where, similar to, say, housing and mental health agreement and the work we're doing with health, we bring together the entire service system, both at a strategic level, but also at a client coordination level. So we are strengthening those things. And yes, look, a large proportion of our tenants and also those tenancies that are managed by community housing providers are people living with mental illnesses. And that's a priority for us and a strong focus inside the organization.
Could you describe a little what the cross-sector groups are that you're bringing together at that kind of governance level?
Yeah, so it's mainly focused on housing and homelessness providers, but our long-term relationship with mental health also allows us to bring them in at both the case coordination and at a strategic level. Right. So that will be a focus. And look, I think we are after housing outcomes, and whatever supports a person into a house and then also helps them maintain a tenancy, because I think, as Karen, you mentioned, that entries is probably just the first hurdle, and it's a very high bar. Like, it's very hard to get into social housing, but beyond that, there's a whole heap of support that needs to wrap around that person to help them maintain that tenancy and get the other life outcomes that they need to achieve. And often we see that it becomes like an endpoint, that services work with the person until they are in a house, and then of course that priority support sort of falls off. And then that's when I think a lot of the tenancy issues with neighbors and other things prop up. So I think we definitely need like more housing and support models. And as a government, we're obviously very open to and very interested in hearing about new models and how we can support them. And I think Habilis is an example. And of course, the minister's already committed to 2 new havens in New South Wales. So I think we have a very strong focus, and we would definitely want to work with any providers, anybody who's got a good idea, and we would love to see more ideas coming to the fore.
I think I'm being asked to move to this side of the room. I'm not sure. But it's good timing, because I was going to ask Karen a question. Oh, right. They're trying to take a picture.
The light
I'm
is
out
more
of frame. So, Karen, I think we've talked a little bit about the range of supports and housing that's needed. And given the evolution of New South Wales health policy on the CLS program, what do you think have been the most important changes to the program and the most important things that are now being incorporated into those programs?
Thanks very much. I think one of the strengths of CLS as it is now, and HASI Plus, which is for the people who need more care, but again, time limited, 2 years time limited, is that it's responded to the diversity of needs and the diversity of preferences. So initially, for example, the usual groups who either benefited or were excluded, those sort of changes have been made. So to think about if you have a young Aboriginal person who is used to living in a particular community with a group of people, how do you respond to that? You know, that's quite different to an inner city apartment living alone. And so being able to think what are the range of possibilities that people might want, but even more importantly, listening to what somebody says they want and working out how to make that happen. I think the second big change is to think, well, housing first, yes, but then what next? So living in a house where it's safe, and you're lonely is not your end goal. You're living in a house so that you can have social participation, you can have economic participation, you stay well, you have a plan for when you're not well, means that you can't just rely on your housing provider, and you can't just rely on your psychosocial support provider. You need to be linked into the employment providers, to your local community, to community groups. And so it's thinking about beyond the housing first. Of course, housing first is important. That's what these programs are all about. But housing first, housing support, as we've discussed in the panel here, but then all of the other things that make our lives meaningful.
So I think, Adele, we have time for a couple of questions from the room. Is there?
Hey, g'day, just a question about, in some of those higher conversational spaces or in the research or anything like that, has there been anything, Brock, about the bridging between those housing and tenancy support services when someone's needs or opportunities may change to move within more supported housing into something like the CLS program? Is that built at all into the conversations around the tenders and things, or is it still kept quite separate? If you understand, yeah.
Thank you. So again, I think that's a really interesting question at two levels. So on the individual level, where we see it working best is where the housing provider or the housing support provider and the mental health or psychosocial support or the clinical team all actually know each other. And so when something changes, they're able to go, yeah, look, the circumstances have changed and this person's asked me to work out how to fix that. But equally, I think what's important about these sort of initiatives is what's happening at the system level. So how is it that mental health policy and housing policy, employment policy, disability policy, how are they all working together? And I know a lot of it is very fraught because it's about cost shifting, but where we see it working well is where those sort of relationships are intentionally invested in. So at the individual level and at the system level. And that's hard because people change and move all the time. But one of the strengths, and I heard from the previous panel, is that means that the community managed organisations are involved at the individual level and the system level.
Do we have a question at the back here?
Hi, Amy Wyndham from the Mental Health Branch at New South Wales Health, and the programs that Karen's speaking about are actually part of my portfolio area. Just a couple of points of clarification. There is no time limit on either HASI CLS or HASI Plus. You can stay in those programs for as long as needed, but it is built very much around independent support plans that the consumer or human being actually sets out what they need to with that relational support provided by their family carers and kinship groups. Secondly, under the Housing and Mental Health Agreement, it sits between health and DCJ homes. We have networks across New South Wales that includes staff from LHDs, from homes, and from our CMO providers, and they work incredibly hard to make sure people can sustain tenancies through the mechanisms that are at their disposal. There are a few other things, but I can't remember what they were now.
Geez, Amy, it's great. We didn't realise we had the expert in the room, so if there's anything else that you wanted to add. No? Okay.
I'm asking something a little bit naive here, so I apologise if it's... but again, I'm focused on, do we need medically model sitting at the top of our community or not? So looking up the Habilis team, one psychiatrist, 7 staff that are either admin, legal or property related, 1 peer worker, 1 mental health nurse. Who's the caseworker? Where are the services? Now, I'm just going to say, I know that what Martin Place looked like before COVID, the amount of people there that were homeless, anyone who's got a roof over their head, health improves. I also know there's a lot of people still go together, join together because they lack community. They were divided and fractured and they didn't have a sense of community. And where the hell are the supports, and where are your staff that are making sure they get those supports? It's a naive question because I'm not familiar with Habilis.
No, it's a good question. Well, firstly, we're building the plane while flying it, so it's early days, and there's been, some financial stresses. It's backed by the Bank of Mum and Dad. And but the difference in the model with Habilis is that it is medically led, because all the people who part of the admission criteria, of course, is you have a major mental illness. For example, the 20 people that we've taken to Habilis have spent 2,600 nights in hospital in the year prior to coming to us. So in that sense, we're really running a little hospital. Allow me. About half the people have NDIS budgets, right? And the NDIS budgets amount to more than $1 million. That's $1.2 million a year. But the other half, who are equally disabled, have nothing. Right, so of course the ones who've got the NDIS have got people coming and going all the time, and we've got some fantastic ones, a couple that are visible to us. We don't get a penny for that, but the good thing is that we're able to kind of make use of those very comprehensive psychosocial services. I do feel it's a bit of a weakness with Haven, or it was when I initially visited Haven, was they didn't have a formal arrangement for medical treatment for a cohort that mostly required some kind of formal arrangement. That was the Haven one, which all the first residents of Haven 1 at South Yarra had severe forms of schizophrenia. So that's part of the Habilis model, is that it is medically led, for better or worse, because of the conditions with which people come into the Haven, Habilis.
I feel like we're getting to an interesting afternoon discussion, and I think we've run out of time now. But I just want to finish by saying, look, I think I just want to go back to this concept of homes for people with complex mental health challenges, and I think we've seen a variety of solutions, a variety of models. And I'm hoping that, as we move forward as a country with the changes to the NDIS, the development of hopefully investment by government and more foundational supports, that there'll be an appropriate focus on housing with support in the next budget announcements. So thanks to all the panellists, and I think they'll be here for a little bit longer to continue some of those discussions if you're interested.
This is your chance. I know there was a lot of energy in the room, a lot of people who wanted to share ideas with the Minister and to ask questions and to give feedback. And this is your opportunity to do that. We really do want to hear from you. Before we get underway, good start. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I'd like to acknowledge people with lived and living experience who are in the room, their strengths and skills. I'd like to acknowledge the One Door Fellowship for their energy and contribution and commitment. I would also like people to shift to tables, so there's about 4 or 5 of you at a table, and if we can make sure that there's a Mind or a One Door staff member at every table to kind of facilitate the feedback, that would be terrific. We've got an engagement exercise a bit later on, and there is a card with Wi-Fi. If anybody's phone or laptop isn't connecting to the Wi-Fi, there should be a little card on your table that has the Wi-Fi link. So I'm looking for Adele, who I think has distributed those cards. All right, I might get underway and just share a couple of the context slides. So what we're going to do now is give you a little bit of a political overview of the context. We're going to share some of the policy priorities that this symposium came up with last year, and we did actually send those through to Minister Jackson. She's expecting to hear from us again this year. And happily, some of those policy priorities have been implemented. Then we're going to be asking you what the most important mental health issue is for you, and the top 4 priorities for mental health in the 2027 New South Wales election, and a bit of a summary at the end. So just to give you a bit of a sense of the timeline, there's been just recently a big federal budget. A whole bunch of reforms to the NDIS have been tabled. There's been an extension to the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement, as the Minister referenced. There will be a mental health ministers meeting in September. Importantly, in New South Wales, in March next year, there's an election. So this is really is a good time to feed views and feedback back to the government. And to the peak groups who are in the room today as well. There'll be another federal budget in May, and of course a new National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement in June next year. So I'll hand over to David, who's going to take you through the next couple of slides and facilitate some of the feedback from you.
Thanks, Nicola, and hi everyone. Great to be with you and having a chance to build on that discussion we had with the Minister earlier this morning, and to really, get the combined wisdom of everyone in the room and across our amazing organisations and use that to make some political change. On screen here, not to tell you all how to suck eggs or how to analyse how mental health is around the country or in the state, but just to make sure we're starting on the same page. I've got a few things on screen here. I think the critical one, and we've been speaking around this point, is the bottom left, the graph there. The bottom line, the lowest per capita spending on mental health in the country, that is New South Wales. The line just above it is the average federally per capita, which is about $40 more per person across the country is spent federally than on average than in New South Wales. Then you've got Victoria, comparator kind of state, the other next largest state, where the spend in any given year at the moment is about $85 more in Victoria than in New South Wales per person. This is on the 23-24 financial year figures, which are the most up-to-date ones online to do this exercise. The top line is the Northern Territory, where the number is about $115 more per person. Of course, a smaller population and different demographics, but just to give you a sense of the gap between New South Wales and other states, and that is part of the context to what we've been discussing today. I've got a few other things on screen there. State election coming up in March of next year, the Premier and the opposition leader in the middle, but also on the right-hand side, a couple of, I guess, the big mental health pieces of news across last year, the psychiatrist crisis and reporting on that, new legislation trying to reduce the state government's responsibility for claims related to psychological injury at work, which was in the Parliament for a long time. And of course, there are also some tragic and rare incidents that have led media coverage in a way that's always stigmatising, discriminatory and sometimes damaging, but it has been part of the political context here as well, sadly. So that is some of the context we're working with the state government in terms of what we need to push them on, and the challenges that we see and that they see as well. Jumping to the next slide, just one more orienting slide on the politics to then get to speaking with you all in a moment. There are 4 big pieces of reform on the federal and state agenda at the moment. They're all on screen here. In the top right-hand corner, we have the NDIS following the budget just recently and consistently over the last few years. There has been lots of reform in the NDIS space, despite the federal NDIS minister's assurances that people with a psychosocial disability won't be directly targeted. Large-scale changes and are likely to impact all people within the scheme, and that absolutely includes people with a psychosocial disability. So we're working to make sure that those changes work for people, people in mind and one-door services and across the country. Also on screen there is the unmet needs report. We know that there are almost 500,000 people across the country who need psychosocial support and aren't receiving those supports. So there needs to be more funding. There needs to be thought to how to deliver services differently. The other 2 on there are foundational supports, top left, design of a new scheme of supports for people with psychosocial needs, but that is connected to NDIS reform. The key point for us there is that you shouldn't be removing people from the NDIS probably at all, but definitely not until you've designed and implemented and have a new scheme up and running. You can't do these things in the wrong order, and the government at the moment is trying to put the cart firmly before the horse. Finally, bottom left, the overarching agreement for federal and state funding, the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement, has been extended by 1 year. So this upcoming financial year will be an extension of the current agreement, which means for an extra year, federal and state policy is effectively on hold while they're negotiating what the funding envelope looks like. So I'm conscious that on both of those slides, that's a lot of context. On this slide in particular, it's lots of policy reform, which is the drier end of all of this work. It's not the human end, even though it's really consequential. We want to get to the human end in the slides that we'll get to in a second when we open up to you. But just before that, I'll switch to Nicola to take us through what the 4 priorities were that you, as a group, got to in the last symposium to give us some context for the session we'll have now.
Okay, so you can see on the slide, last year we did make a recommendation of peer workers as first responders, and for anybody who read The Guardian this morning, you'll see that the Minister is actually going to announce that in the forthcoming budget. We don't know exactly what that might look like, but that's pretty exciting, and I'm sure it's because we told her to do it, so, you know, and it's a really good idea. Let's think about what we're going to ask her to do this year. We also asked for more community-based services led by people with lived experience. Again, a big theme today. We asked her to raise the issue and enhance the NDIS for people with psychosocial disability. That's been a much less happy story. We are seeing very concerning reform directions to the NDIS for people with psychosocial disability. And last year we did also make a recommendation about funding and staffing step up, step down services. I think we will get them in New South Wales. Not sure exactly when, but I think we should keep pushing for those. So last year, Cathy Borman put together a letter to the Minister encapsulating our recommendations, and this was her response on the screen here. So, David, are you doing the next bit, or was that?
You go for it.
Okay. Do you want to? So what we've heard today so far is around the power and potential of lived experience-led service delivery. We've heard about the need for investment in community-managed mental health, and I'd just like to echo Evelynne's suggestion that a lot of that does need to come from the community-managed sector. and that there is a need for increased investment in that area. We've heard about the vital importance of housing as a human right and as a real key to mental health. The ongoing underfunding of mental health in New South Wales. It's clearly time for some innovation in service delivery models, but the change will take commitment and dedication. And I know that it is hard. A lot of these ideas aren't new. They have been around for some time, but it is also a truth for anybody who's ever been involved in any form of advocacy. By the time you are absolutely entirely sick of saying it, you know the evidence inside out, that might be the time that actually governments start to listen to you. So please stay with us. I know it's the end of the day and people are tired, but we're really keen to hear from you in terms of what you think we've left out. In fact, I think that's the next question, isn't it? So we do have a Slido which will allow us to look at the questions that are coming from people. There is also the opportunity, if you're not a Slido person, to write it on a piece of paper and give it to one of the One Door in Mind volunteers that are around the room, and we can bring that up to the stage and read that out as well. So the first, shall I hold it back to you?
So you'll see on screen there, if you do want to work with this on your phone, there's a QR code, there's a link that will get you into the system where I will activate the first question now. We'll then switch the screen over in a moment to the Slido itself. So for those that are uploading responses on the Slido, they will come up on screen, but we'll pause at a couple of points during these few questions to also talk with the room and hear your thoughts. We've got someone capturing the conversation as we're going, so we'll make sure that everything that you share now we have collected and that we can feed back to the Minister and the government and build into our advocacy platform as we head towards state election next year. So we make sure that our voice is your voice and that we're pushing in the right way. So to the Mind and One Door staff that we're going to jump around the room, they're there to support you. The first question up on screen, you can see there is what's the most important mental health issue for you? So I'll pause there for a second. It's 8 minutes past 3. I'll give you a couple of minutes till 10 past for those that are doing it online or on the paper at the tables. So what is the most important mental health issue for you? Give you about 30 seconds more. I can see a lot coming through. Yeah, sure. Thanks. I can see another 10 people or so typing away in there, so thank you. Can see a few written responses coming in as well. Thank you. Multimedia crowdsourcing here. Yeah, I think that we're going to do March here. This question. I think I can see one there, and I think there was a second one. I thought Adele had that. And all right, how's everyone going? I've been scanning through as you've gone, so I might start to give a bit of a sense of that as the last couple are coming in. I can see there are 3 or 4 more people at least still typing. Thank you. As you do, I'm going to speak to a few that I've seen at least twice, if not more, in that list. I've seen anxiety multiple times, so clearly people worried about where reform might be going, making sure that we get a good outcome out of NDIS reform, out of the negotiation over the national agreement with states. I'm also seeing access multiple times, said in a few different ways. Access to psychiatrists, access to a range of services, access to services that are affordable. So those 2 points coming through loud and clear. Underfunding has come through, and that's a clear theme across the day as well. NDIS transition into what comes next, that point about the cart being before the horse. So thank you for reinforcing that one. I agree. Respite is there in the list as well, respite for carers. NDIS changes have dramatically reduced and affected respite as well, so that's clear. There's a sense of a lack of real support, whether generally or for younger people. There's 2 in a row that have come through on that point. Also, more supports around suicide support, aftercare, suicidal ideation, that's definitely in there. Reducing the centrality of clinical care is in your list as well. So this is a golden list. Thank you. There's a lot there. I can see the last 2 people are responding. Thank you for that. It looks like they've just come in. So I'm going to push it over to the next question, which will... Sorry, Nicola, go for it. Some written responses from the floor as well. Thank you.
I'm just doing paper Slido over here. So you've got no forced medication is something we haven't covered enough. The NDIS not meeting the needs of schizophrenia recovery at a stage when needing and wanting to go... Oh, I can't read this person's writing. Maybe they can tell us that. Pardon? Okay. Not wanting to go to the general public activities, for example, at sports. Okay. And not wanting group NDIS activities. Yeah, thank you. Physical health priorities in severe mental illness, for example, the Equally Well initiatives and access to exercise physiologists. Insecure housing, increased access to cost-effective drugs and the impact on recovery, tenancy, etc. And NDIS for psychosocial disability. Great. All right. I think we can go on to the next.
Perfect. To the last couple of people that have started opening up responses, when I go to the next question now, that will close. But there is an open field at the end of all of this. So anything that you want to capture, we will capture in the room and also through these digital interactions as well. So I'm going to open the next question, which is stepping from what's the most important issue to you to what do you think has been missing from the conversation today? Is there anything that we haven't touched on that, it might not quite be your most important issue because they've come up in the last one, but something that you think really should be on our radar, on the government's radar, part of the conversation that isn't sufficiently focused on, doesn't get enough attention? It'd be great if you'd take a couple of minutes to chat with the people next to you. We'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to talk about that, think about the day, but think about what's really important and what's been missing from the conversation today. Thank you. We'll then come back together and have mics on the floor once you've had 3 or 4 minutes at your tables. Thank you. I can see there's a couple more coming in online, but we might now open this up for some comments on this point. I know I've got a comment here up the front, so let's start there. And then anybody else, I'll watch out for hands over the next couple of minutes.
Should I stand up?
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I want to talk about supported accommodation. What I heard today was very limited. It was there were criterion which were easy. Everyone was really happy about the work they were doing and keep on doing that work. But my son, who was shot 3 years ago in his own home because he was having physical cutting himself, the police broke in. In 8 seconds, he was dead. He had NDIS, 2 amazing workers, but unfortunately he also had dual diagnosis, which meant that he was set upon, willingly probably, by people who supplied him with drugs and what he needed. And a lot of people like him need supported accommodation where they're quite normal in a lot of ways, but they have this affliction which no one can get rid of. It can improve, but once you've got it, voices and all that sort of thing, and no matter what support he gets from his family, he needs that from the community and the government. So I'm very pleased that some people, the homeless people and whoever else Dr. Olav is helping, and the government who are actually doing quite a lot of work, but there is no supported accommodation. People in refuges have supported accommodation. It's limited for a small period of time, but they are safe because no one can get in there who is undesirable and will hurt them. So what I want is for the government to really look at this instead of little isolated, oh, this is easy, this is cute, we're going to sound great, and actually provide unlimited supported accommodation, truly supported. The one that we saw, that gentleman, that's fine, but the people like my son, who is dead, are out there and they need help, and we can't give them that, the government can. So that's what I want. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really sorry that I'm sorry that happened to you. I think we might go to some of the other tables, and I've also got the paper Slido. And just to let people know, we have Louise. Louise, can you stand up? There's Louise, the back of the room. Louise is scribing all of the ideas from today and capturing it, capturing what people say, and we're happy to share the record of that, particularly with the One Door Fellowship, but anybody else in the room who would like to have a look at it. So I'll just read my paper Slido first, which is housing close to family and community. The housing one is such a massive theme, so it's good that we did talk about that today. The trustee and guardian, they close at 2 p.m. The lady with the handwriting, tell me more about this.
Children grown up, schizophrenia on the dementia. The guardian takes over for her as an unmedicated stage and manages seniors financially bothered. Now, those people grow up, get better, but they have a great difficulty getting out of the trustee and guardian, let alone contacting them in person. Excuse me, green button. By closing their phones at 2 p.m. Many people with schizophrenia have what would be extended sleeping, especially with clozapine, and it gives them no phone access. And my daughter was kept on a minimal amount, and I'm supplementer, of course, but when somebody a bit higher up went, oh God, they rectified it and jumped up her weekly allowance, you know, in a flash when they saw. It's like they act like they're really looking after, but basically they are retentive.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot in these written responses, both digitally and here on paper. We're going to jump to the third and central question of what we're hoping to get to, which is, having raised all of these issues, thinking about the critical way of framing them and taking them to the New South Wales government. So I'm going to jump to the next one on the screen for you, which is what should be the top 4 priorities following next year's state election. It'll be on your screen in a second. There we go. This is the state election, the New South Wales election in March of 2027. What do you think should be the top 4 priorities for mental health for the government to implement after the 2027 election? So again, if you'd take a couple of moments to talk with the person next to you or the whole table, and then whichever method you'd like to use to provide that feedback, we're all ears, digital and paper. And the real thing, Adele's right. We'll write to Minister Jackson and ask her if she can remove Donald Trump. I think it's worth a shot.
This is here. Buzz. But you say what?
How are we doing this on Slido as well?
Yep, switched over my thing, yep. Right, yep, it's updating.
I think addressing.
So they're just voting on that.
When you're writing those responses into the Slido, if you'd number them, that would be great, rather than one at a time. If you'd write in as one block, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that would make it easier to see the sort of argument you're making about what's a priority and what you'd really like to see ideally.
Alternatives to Ahmad Smith. Customer institution published.
I choose to.
My name is Marius, by the way. I like the bundle. Yeah, I miss go.
This is by those moves. Ouch.
Also, I talk about and like groups coming together inside the house. So yeah, we started, right?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah.
So we're all unbelievable, literally hellish swatter. Just also it. He's doing their turn now, which is real absolutely fantastic.
Time sort of this section, pitch data section, just and one.
Oh,
Having
You need so many more alternatives to community.
Yeah, metal, so he ends up stay.
So you're 5 together, is that right?
6 men. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, so you come together, to focus on certain.
Yes. I'm always studying that measurement of plastic lift organizations, and then we do deep dives at different service. Yes, I wrote those for that we say can you, but and I suppose all musical like there's a shoe from ins kan ik het best Amsterdam Kuram and Doyle, but it's a jumbo.
Can I get a sense from the floor? How are you going on those 4? Do you feel like you need another minute or 2, or are you getting close? That looks like another minute or 2. All right, let's have 2 more minutes and we'll bring it back in.
Yeah, again.
there was students fix. You could fix. Yeah. But they're gonna.
The spirit already converted into something different, yeah. But I think still something similar over there, but type.
This is all coming very. I like
Okay, thank you. There are a few of those grouped votes starting to come through on the digital version. Is there any table on this question about the New South Wales election for next year and the key priorities? Is there any table that would like to speak to what they were discussing? I can see a couple of written ones coming in. Any hands to comment on this question?
Does anyone want to report back from their tables or have the floor? Otherwise, we're going to go to Slido and paper Slido.
No comments? All right. I'm seeing a few of these votes coming through. They'll be coming up for you as well. One list suggests doubling CLS funding, establishing a step up, step down in each LHD, supporting workforce sustainability, and realigning existing funding to 30% for community managed organisations. So more investment and different investment would be my sort of summary of those 4 points. There's some great, really actionable points there. Yeah, David.
I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, just something to add. I heard the budget was focusing on negative gearing and capital gains tax, and things stuff like inflation, interest rates, and that.
Yeah, it's a really good get. You're right, and hopefully those kind of tax changes, progressive tax changes, allow the government to have more revenue to be able to then spend on things like mental health. Unfortunately, for our purposes, the capital gains and negative gearing changes are going to make less than the NDIS cuts.
Yeah.
So the fight has to continue. How much money is allocated?
We've got a chart on that in a minute. It's a very good question. So I'm just going to read out some of my paper Slidos here. We've got action around supporting NGOs and CMOs around the NDIS and those with reduced funding. Thank you. Agree with that one. Ministry for carers. More investment in the educational environment, so schools, TAFE and uni, particularly culturally and linguistically diverse students and more NGO partnerships, lived experience education in all universities, educating health students, specialist peer coaches in physical health in New South Wales health teams. Oops. Thank you. Housing for women, and specialist services for women's mental health, and more psychiatrists that people can afford in areas west of Sydney. And then another note from someone saying caseworkers should be held accountable for decisions that they make that are detrimental to the people they should be serving, and workers within the public system should be more accountable.
One last comment, and then we'll get to the last question to close up.
With that funding, what percentage of that funding is going to NDIS?
A lot. A lot's going at the moment. That's what the government's worried about.
That's
why there's big cuts. We're going to come to a funding.
But aren't they?
I
don't know. But they're more interested in the defence. Like there's a lot of money that's put in protecting our borders. You got the oil crisis as well.
Yeah, that's right. All of those priorities and balancing those across the budget's definitely a challenge for the federal government and the state government. But I think that just reinforces the fact that we need to always be advocating for mental health and psychosocial disability investment, because it's always a busy field, but that's never enough of an excuse for the government to not spend more where people are involved and where it's the kind of sector that we all work in or rely on. So this is the last question on screen now. This is one where there are multiple choice voting options. You can choose at most 2 of these options. So you can't just say all of them, which I agree. It would be good to be able to say, do all of them and change things in this way. So if you'd jump into this last question, you can vote for 2 of these choices. And then we'll get to the wrapping up. So I'll just give you maybe 1 to 2 minutes on this one. It should be a bit quicker because it's just selecting up to 2 votes. You can only select 1 if you'd prefer.
Spend it differently.
Thank you.
Put more money into community management or health pipeline. Or there's another one where you just...
Okay, let's bring it back together. I can see a couple more votes have come in. As I said, thanks everyone. This will be our last comment, and then we'll close up and head into the final remarks. So you can see the trend on screen there. A clear win in the voting for spending the money differently, investing differently, thinking about how to deliver services innovatively in a different way. In community managed mental health is how I'm going to interpret the answers to that question, but we've got your thoughts across the preceding questions for how we should be thinking about that. Clearly that's the leading option there. And then the next one is aiming for parity for Victoria, and so that's saying don't just invest a bit more, invest properly, make sure you do this right, increase the amount spent on mental health and psychosocial disability properly and get better outcomes. No votes for maintaining current expenditure. So that is a message in itself. 0 for that option. Thank you. That's actually really helpful, right? That is a clear message to give back to the government. It's absolute, it is. And then I can see there are 12% of votes for other. It won't be up on the screen, but I will on the Slido now click through to an open text field. Anything more you want to share with us and you feel you haven't had the option to do that, or the opportunity, that will be available online on the Slido now. I won't close that until the end of the day, and then we'll capture all of your thoughts. So it won't be on the screen, but it will be open for you to put things in. So thank you. I'll hand over to Nicola to close, and we can shift back to the slide deck onto our final slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody, for staying with us and for engaging with us over that policy session. It's great to have that really clear outcome that can help us shape a response to the Minister. So what will happen from here is Louise has, as I said, been scribing. We've got paper Slido, we've got online Slido. We'll be putting that all together into a big draft document. We will be sharing that with the fellowship and we will be finalising a letter to send through to the Minister. Sorry, did you?
Yeah, just wanted to add something without embassy. I think as well as writing to the Minister, a really good thing to do is just to speak to your local member, and you can actually book in and see them. It's much easier than you think. They'll have times available. If you send them an email saying you'd like to speak to them, this is what you want to speak to them about, it actually has an impact.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's their job to speak to you, isn't it? So thank you very much. We will be following up, and hopefully this time next year at the symposium, the Minister will be telling us more things that the government is going to implement as a result of our advocacy. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone that's still here. I know it's been a lot, but I hope you've found it as valuable as what I have. It's been the first time, as I said this morning, me being at the symposium. But I found it fantastic, hearing everybody's different voices. And as I was coming through each of the components of the programme, I was taking down some notes, around the key points and what really resonated with me. And Tim, is Tim still around? So absolutely fantastic. Tim, I heard that the need for involvement of the family and carer was so important in your own journey. And I think that really resonates, that not only in the work that we do with our clients, but how important families and carers are in relation to people's recovery. I loved the here I am from an individual, but also, as Tim says, not here I am. No, it's not about me. It's about every person in the room. I thought it was interesting that ITOs is the second highest rate here in voluntary treatment, and the impact that has on individuals. And it is absolutely time for change. I loved your poetry, Tim, and I did share with Tim that when I was memorising parts of my speech, I went and memorised that rather than Tim's name, I had Zach Zephron, and we had a laugh, and he says, thank God you never introduced him because he wouldn't have came. So thank you, Tim. The importance of connection. I heard the word courage consistently throughout the day. I think I used it at the start of the day. And thank you for displaying your courage throughout the day. And I also heard a lot from our lived experience, the frustration in our peers, like, we've been doing this for years, nobody's hearing. And then that resonates with what Nicola says. It's exhausting. You have the solution, you continue to advocate, and then just someday, 3 years later goes, well, that's a great idea. So keep advocating, keep talking to your MPs, absolutely. And to Evelynne, I know that she's left us now, but that hashtag, the power actually sits in this room. The power sits that we as community managed organisations, we need to be advocating, not just for money, but for the appropriate models, if we're ever going to see any appropriate change. I thought what I heard from, and maybe it's just me and where I sit from a growth point of view or opportunity point of view, but I heard Minister Jackson excellent and very openly saying, we want to hear about it, and definitely I think there's funding there. I almost had a proposal in my bag to say, here's one I made earlier, but I thought I'll leave it and follow up on that one. I also heard the from Tim, I know that beings making sure the right people are in the room when services are being designed. It's imperative that lived experience is centred as government are asking us for solutions, and that their voice is loud and proud. What else did I also hear? Our panels. I thought that our panels, a big shout out to all our panel members, and thank you and for the presentations. I think that when we sit on the panels and we get to ask questions, in particular, Liam, and we watch testimonials for clients, this is why we're here. It's our why. It's why we get up in the morning. So it's just so powerful to sit in the room and hear directly from people that have been in services and what that outcome was for their life, and we heard that across a couple of different models, as well as to Gill's point when she was presenting. There is many different housing models. I'll do that in a minute. I'm getting shouted at over here. Thank the photographer. Woo! One of the things I've felt strongly is listening to the discussions that symposiums like this and people coming together creates incredible value. It's a space where we can offer different perspectives. We don't all need to agree. We come from different walks in life, of different narratives, but there was definitely a collective and a sharing in the room today. And I think today has reminded us that whilst our mental health system is complex, David and Nicola put up the major reforms that are happening, and cart's coming before the horse, and what we've got to do is advocate for the people that will feel the consequence of that. That is actually our mandate and our job as we're leaving here today. I also heard words like people need safety, people need connection, people need hope, they need stable housing, as it's a human right. They need services that see them as a whole person and not just a diagnosis or a funding package. That really resonated with me. Someone said that to me in the break. And people need communities that genuinely believe recovery is possible. And also services that recognise the culture of that community. I was just over in the back table there and saying, the symposium's been great, all the information's been great, but where's the diverse service conversation and recognising the communities? So across today, we've heard powerful discussions about lived experience leadership. We've heard about SUDs or parks, housing. We've also heard about innovation and reform, and we heard a little bit. You hear Kerry talking about, where are we going to get workforce and how do we really look after the lived experience and the peer workforce. I also heard clearly today that the future mental health reform cannot simply be about redesigning the system without having the people that it's serving centred to it and their voice recognised and heard. It's also about redesigning relationships, our relationships with government, our relationships between services. As a collective and united, we will stand and will be heard rather than diluting that and going individually. And also relationship between clinical and non-clinical. And I feel like I could say this as a clinician, that there is absolutely and fundamentally a need for clinical services, as well as community managed organisations. And again, together, in partnership, we do achieve better outcomes. So I think overall, from the broad topics that we discussed and we heard today, that we shared a very rich day together in this symposium. I've left away with lots of thoughts, all of them positive. I do hold hope. I mean, there's the way that you come into rooms and you go, oh, the reform's happening, oh, there's not enough money, oh, there's not enough. But that's the mental health sector. There's never enough money. I'm hearing from colleagues sitting at a table, our population's doubling, we've got the lowest investment, so all I say is, well, what are we going to do about it? We don't just sit back and take it. So I will close with some thank yous. I want to thank everyone who works behind the scenes. As I said this morning, I know it was a bit early, giving a shout out to the marketing and comms and the volunteers and the coordination and the Mind board members and the Mind Executive and everyone else that's behind the scenes, thank you, because I know that these are tricky gigs to coordinate. I also want to thank everyone in this room for coming along today. And I especially want to acknowledge and recognise the fellowship. They're such an important part. It's fundamental that we continue to connect with the fellowship, and we will be following up with an email soon after this meeting. So I can't thank you enough. Your voice, being at the table, being in this room, authentic, is really valuable. So thank you. I also, go, round of applause. I also would like to thank our panel members. I know people are extremely busy, and some of our VIPs to take a full day out of work. I mean, I'm just dreading what the emails are going to look like, but I think it was really worthwhile and really valuable. So again, thank you very much. I'm not going to keep you any longer, and we'll see you again next year. Thank you.